The story began with a gathering of warriors before a powerful wizard. The magician attacked with staggering force, surrounded by a terrifying, immense aura. Afterward, a young man appeared, trying to catch his breath after a grueling battle. He thought that this was the end. He muttered the labyrinth master's name under his breath, preparing to strike with all his remaining strength and determination. The young man launched a powerful attack, and everything around him was illuminated by a mighty, immense light, from which a radiant beam of great speed and power towards its target. There was a deafening explosion, causing colossal destruction. The atmosphere itself seemed to crack from the monstrous force of the explosion, devastating everything around it. The explosions continued, growing stronger and more violent until they seemed to destroy everything in their surroundings. After that, it became clear that what had happened was merely the events of a video game. The young man sitting in front of the computer screen saw a notification appear that he had completed the game. However, he noted that although the difficulty was getting higher and higher, his character was passing everything. Then a list of his achievements and the various difficulties he had overcome appeared in front of him. Should he record a year's play? But suddenly he noticed a special difficulty option. It was labeled Final Level, or Last, which piqued his interest. So he decided to play the game. A notification popped up on the screen about a new special ability, which was unlocked because he had finished the game. He started customizing a new character named Caleb, and since the main character is a mage, he decided to put all 10 ability points into wisdom only. As soon as he pressed the start button, something very strange happened. A strange flash suddenly unnaturally emanated from the computer, and he heard a loud voice calling to him, which made him flinch with shock. He was suddenly in a completely different place, and someone was calling him a criminal and ordering him to wake up, which made him wonder in amazement. How could they be talking to him? He started trying to convince himself that it was just a dream, wondering how he could be a criminal when only a few moments ago he was just playing a game. But the angry man didn't let him think quietly, shouting angrily in his face, then shoved him, roughly knocking him to the ground. The angry man coldly said that death was inevitable and madness would make the pain less, which made the young man wonder again if he was dreaming. And if so, why did he feel the pain? He noted with dismay how realistic the dream was, and wondered with intense fear why it was so vivid. Then an old man appeared and told them that they had all become slaves, that they were the ones who had committed the crimes, and that this labyrinth was their last chance to change their fate. He added that the survivors would be able to free themselves from slavery with the money they earned, or go to university. The young man was shocked to hear the name of the university, which he knew well from the game, but never expected it to exist in reality. There was still no way he could believe that he had gotten into the game. Then he was forced to enter the maze along with a group of people, and after a couple of moments, the group of people were already inside. The guy realized that he was the character Caleb that he had created in the game. He immediately expected the worst when he realized that they would be facing extremely dangerous monsters in the maze from the game. He quickly decided to test the characteristics of his companions who entered the maze with him to find out their capabilities as well as his own strength. But his companions were in a state of complete nervous breakdown. One of them tried to calm them down, telling them that everything would be fine. The hysteria increased, and one of them had a mad fit of terror, screaming hysterically that the prophecy said they would all die. The young man realized with great alarm that everyone had lost control of themselves due to extreme panic and terror. He tried to calm them down, telling them that calmness and concentration was what would allow them to survive, and asked them to move in search of a way out. But one of them completely lost control and ran away, screaming to get out of there immediately, which made the young man very angry. Caleb was surprised to see the one running away suddenly stop. And then he was even more amazed when iron spikes suddenly erupted from the man's body. At that moment, a monster with terrifying glowing eyes and sharp fangs appeared, preparing to attack them. One of the men started screaming like a madman, exulting that the prophecy had come true exactly as he had said, while the girl was horrified and shocked to see the blood and sharp points piercing the unfortunate man's back. It became clear to everyone that the prophecy was not wrong, especially after the other man was killed by a spear. Two goblins furiously attacked the young man. Yernal screamed in fear, while Caleb seemed momentarily paralyzed by the tension of the situation. The situation was deteriorating very quickly. The goblins were rushing at them, and Caleb realized with great alarm that they wouldn't survive if they kept this up. The two monsters attacked Caleb in a terrifying and swift manner, and he felt the gravity of the situation, feeling that death was very close. Suddenly, a special ability called a staggered hourglass appeared in front of him, and time stopped for 60 seconds, giving Caleb a chance to move or think. Caleb was completely shocked when he realized that it was now his turn, and that he had a chance to act at this critical moment. He could clearly see that time had indeed stopped, and that the step-by-step hourglass was his new special ability from the game. Caleb tried to calm down and focus, quickly figuring out how to utilize the remaining seconds of the ability. He started counting movement points. It would cost him the use of the ability, and he was trying to figure out the best possible solution in this short time. Caleb was surprised to find that even though time had stopped, he could speak and breathe, without wasting movement points. Caleb realized that he could now speak commands and the system would follow them. Caleb made a decision, and started using his magic staff to attack the monsters. He used all of his movement points to quickly and skillfully cast a fireball spell. When his move was over, an hourglass appeared, indicating the end of his power, and the fireball raced towards the monsters. The attack caused a powerful, terrifying, fiery explosion that engulfed the entire area. Yernal stared in utter amazement at the fiery explosion in front of her, which provided them with temporary protection. Caleb was in shock, realizing that he had almost died for real, and continued to wonder what he had done wrong to be in such a dangerous situation. He went back to thinking about the rules of the game and his abilities, assuring himself that his knowledge of magic was superior to everyone else's, despite the complexity of the situation. Caleb walked over to the girl for a moment and sat down, taking advantage of the silence after the explosion to gather his thoughts and get some rest. He asked Yernal what spell was in her staff. She hesitantly replied that it was Lightning Strike, but admitted she'd never used a staff before. Caleb decided that quickly teaching her how to use the spell was better than doing nothing, especially in such a dangerous situation. Caleb asked Yernal to hurry with him to find the exit portal, because staying here meant certain death. With great determination, Caleb assured her that they had to stick together and swore to himself that he would survive at all costs. Caleb began to remember the disaster that had happened years ago, when the monsters broke out of the maze and caused massive destruction. He also remembered how many adventurers and mages had died in this maze because of its extreme complexity and danger. Caleb explained to Yernal that that was the purpose of the labyrinth, to train mages by throwing slaves into it to see which ones could survive. Caleb reminded himself once again that he couldn't be sure that everything he knew was correct, and that he needed to be very careful all the time. Yernal thanked him again for staying with her and supporting her, and introduced herself. Caleb and Yernal walked together through the maze in silence. Yernal was tense and noticed how calm Caleb was compared to her. This calmness was in stark contrast to his earlier talkativeness in the slave wagon. Caleb had been thinking about his past before he came to this place, and realized that he needed to be extremely careful sharing that information with others. Yernal started to say that she used to live in the forest of fairies and work at the mission center, but it was a front for drug dealing. She sadly added that she had been framed, and after failing to pay a fine, she had been turned into a slave. Caleb showed understanding, realizing that she was speaking out of fear. But GH forcefully interrupted her and told her to shut up, causing her to stop immediately and look at him with concern. Caleb was surprised by the system message that his move had begun. He realized he had stepped into a trap without noticing it, and decided to remain calm to analyze the situation. Caleb remembered that traps on the first floor usually popped out of the walls, but luckily, there were no holes on Yernal's side. He considered using his mobility goggles despite the risk, and quickly made sure there were no holes on his side either. He also made sure the ceiling looked intact and assumed the trap was on the floor. He began to remember and analyze the 4 types of traps that appear on the first floor. The first was a trap with rising spikes that pops out of the floor to injure his leg. The second was a trap with exploding iron spikes that causes a powerful explosion and serious injury. The third was a gas trap that causes sleep or poisoning, making victims easy prey for monsters. The fourth was a pitfall trap that caused the floor to collapse, dropping the victim to the lower level with no way to escape. Caleb realized that he didn't have enough time to consider all the possibilities, and that his hourglass ability was about to run out. He decided to act quickly. The guy quickly took his foot off the tile, and put it in the same box as his companion, using all his movement points. So he tripped her, and then moved quickly to get her out of harm's way. Yernal was surprised by Caleb's actions and anxiously asked why he did it. He replied that he did it because he realized that the trap had worked because of her, not because of him. Yernal felt extremely guilty and quickly apologized. She asked him what she should do, and Caleb told her to bring the heavy barrel they had seen earlier on their journey. Yernal quickly agreed and went to get the barrel Caleb had told her about. Half an hour later, Caleb began to get very worried about her delay, wondering if she had fallen into another trap or encountered monsters. He began to blame himself for sending Yernal off alone, but was relieved when he heard her voice yelling that she had returned with the barrel. Yernal came in panting with exhaustion and set the heavy barrel down next to Caleb, who asked her to place the barrel on the tile he was standing on. Caleb made sure the weight of the barrel was enough to hold the trap instead of his foot, and also decided to use his magic staff to move the barrel for fear of another trap. Caleb used a telekinesis spell to move the barrel onto the floor tiles with extreme care. Once the barrel was in place, there was a sudden, powerful explosion in front of them, causing them to jump back in horror. After the explosion subsided, Caleb told Yernal to keep moving, relieved that they had survived the trap of exploding iron spikes. Although he had survived this time, Caleb knew that the situation was still very dangerous, and that there would be many challenges ahead, especially with the turn-based combat system. Caleb cautiously moved on, confident in the need to use his movement points very wisely in the future. Suddenly, more monsters appeared in front of them. Caleb knew that he needed to immediately get ready and use his hourglass ability to fight. The goblins also stood with smirks on their faces. Caleb quickly applied a fireball spell towards the monsters, relying on the system that informed him that the spell would have a short recovery time before it could be used again. Caleb quickly prepared himself and used the fireball spell again with force, trying to destroy the attacking monsters. He carefully used his movement points to cast the spell, declaring the end of his turn. The fire spell resulted in a massive explosion, and the monsters were quickly and efficiently destroyed, and then were simply left as coals on the floor. Caleb realized that he could theoretically conjure 4 fireballs in one move, which amazed and impressed Yernal. Yernal expressed great admiration for Caleb's special abilities and his speed in casting spells, considering it a rare and unique combination of talents. But soon she felt discouraged and told him that she was weak and incapable of using magic, apologizing for feeling like a burden to him. Caleb realized that he might have made a mistake in choosing her as a mage or warrior, but quickly thought that the situation might be different because she was an elf. Caleb asked her how far she could jump, and she recalled that she had been able to jump about 4 meters before. Based on her answer, he realized that her agility was somewhere around level 5, so he offered her a bow and advised her to try it, as she might be more skillful with it than with magic. Indeed, Yernil felt very comfortable with the bow, and said she had used it before in the Forest of Fairies. Caleb was relieved, and asked her to provide fire support from the rear while he used the magic wand. Yernil enthusiastically stated that she would protect Caleb from behind to give him enough time to cast sorcery, and Gigi had almost all of the group's wands already. Yernil suddenly noticed that someone was following them. In fact, her ears moved, and she loudly reported it to the main character. Caleb stopped and turned around worriedly, but they saw no one behind them. Absolutely no one at all. Yernil insisted that she heard something from the other side, but Caleb assured her that he didn't see anyone. He asked her to close her eyes for a moment and listen carefully so they could identify the source of the sound. The girl agreed and closed her eyes. Caleb tested Yernil, asking if she could determine the number of fallen rocks in the neighborhood. Yernil hesitated for a moment, before answering that there were about 3 stones within walking distance of her. Her skill is sound mapping. He then turned his question to Yernil, asking about the number of people chasing them. Yernil concentrated and noticed that about 4 people were approaching them at a noticeable speed. Caleb sensed the danger and decided to avoid a direct confrontation, and decided to quickly seek cover. Caleb told Yernil to hide with him in a certain corner until the enemies arrived, and Yernil quickly agreed. They hid and waited nervously as the sound of the enemy's footsteps slowly approached, and the tension was building strongly. The girl was also scared. She didn't know what they were going to do yet. Suddenly, Caleb came out of his hiding place to face the group that was chasing them. He stood in front of them, looking angry, and asked why they were chasing them. One of the men laughed slyly and told Caleb that it wasn't him they were after. They wanted the elf girl with him. The men asked him to just hand over the girl and they would spare him. The guy stood with the girl and aimed at them, but the bald bastard said the toothpick wouldn't be able to penetrate their shields and spell them weak. One more move and the guy would be lying dead with the girl. He again advised him of the easy choice, for the guy had offered him to be the 5th member of their team, and nastily suggested he split the girl between them. And the elf stood, anxiously waiting for Gigi's response to that. The men tried to convince Caleb that leaving the girl and joining them was a better and safer option for him, but Caleb resolutely refused. Caleb realized that he would never feel safe with this group and assured himself that he would only feel safer and more comfortable with Yurnal. Caleb angrily threatened the men, ordering them to retreat immediately or he would kill them, which impressed Yurnal with his courage and strength. The group leader laughed at Caleb's threat, calling it a joke, but Caleb assured him with dead seriousness that he was not joking. The leader realized that a confrontation was imminent and ordered his men to kill them immediately. Caleb quickly activated his special ability, the hourglass, and prepared for battle, his face full of anger. He thought to himself that he had given them a clear chance, but they refused to take it. Caleb quickly prepared for battle, realizing that the staffs he had taken from his former companions could be very useful in this situation while their opponents were in the water, especially the staff with the electric discharge. Quickly, Caleb cast an electric discharge spell that struck the enemies and paralyzed their movements considerably. Lightning struck the area with force, and the enemies received strong electric shocks, putting them in a difficult position. Convinced of their paralysis, Caleb decided to launch a fireball to finish them off one by one. He began to execute his plan. First, he aimed the fireball at the puddle of water below them. Then he directly attacked the bald leader of the group. Using another fireball attack, Caleb finished his attack, and now the area was on fire, and chaos engulfed the enemy group. The enemies received powerful electric shocks again, leaving them in a state of chaos and intense pain. This caused their weapons to fall from their hands, but not yet the fire charge arrived. This is where the fun part begins. The flames caused the area to explode violently, and the enemies began to scream in terror and utter confusion. Smoke and dust filled everything around after the explosion, and the enemies were completely unable to see clearly. The fireball exploded again with tremendous force in front of the bald group leader, subjecting him to a devastating attack. Caleb quickly told Yurnal to start shooting at the enemies with her bow. She activated her ability and realized where they were in the smoke, and then she fired her arrows with force and accuracy towards the enemies, hidden in the smoke, and the sound of their screams could be clearly heard. Caleb decided to take a short break as his spells needed time to recover, relying on Yurnal to secure the situation. Caleb felt that the remaining time before he could use his skills again was suspiciously long, and he was looking forward to using his magic again. Suddenly, Yurnal shouted, confirming that she had managed to destroy all the enemies single-handedly, which left Caleb in utter amazement. Caleb couldn't believe what he heard. He was sure he only heard 2 arrow shots, no more. But when he looked ahead, he could see clearly that all the enemy had indeed been hit by Yurnal's arrows and were lying there, completely dead. A triple kill with 2 arrows. Caleb smiled and joked that Yurnal had turned out to be a scarier elf than he had expected. But Yurnal admitted that she had been terrified and had tried very hard to hit them. At this point, they were surprised to find that the bald leader of the group was not dead. He suddenly woke up and struggled to speak. The GG noticed this and realized it was time to finish him off 7. The enemy leader asked Caleb in horror, who was he anyway? Expressing his amazement at Caleb's advanced magical abilities. The enemy leader seemed broken and very upset by the injustice he felt, desperately asking, how did it come to this? Caleb sternly replied that it wasn't injustice, it was their own choice to enter the maze and behave so aggressively. But the enemy leader expressed with great sadness and pain that he had no choice, as he was banished and enslaved for lacking any magical talents. The leader bitterly continued, saying that his life would have been very different if he had even half the power of the protagonist. He snickered. After all, he would soon die without accomplishing anything. GH watched this with a cold-blooded stare. Meanwhile, Yurnal felt guilty and apologized to Caleb for telling him earlier that she had killed them all while someone else was still alive. Caleb reassured her that there was no need to apologize and praised her efforts, assuring her that they were safe now. He then asked if this was the first time she had fought. Yurnal replied with great concern, admitting that it was the first time she'd ever shot a real person. Caleb also admitted that it was his first time using magic on real people, confirming that they only did it because they wanted to survive. They then searched the enemies, but he felt very confused because even though it was his first time killing someone, he felt strangely calm. GH didn't feel that what had happened was real enough to give him shock. Caleb began to think back to his previous encounter with the goblins and wondered if he wasn't morally stronger after all of the difficult ordeal. After the battle was over, Caleb felt the heaviness of the scene around him. The disgusting smell of blood and burnt flesh filled the air. Despite his apparent strength, he was sure he would never get used to the feeling. Yurnal interrupted his musings when she excitedly called out to him, holding the backpack she had found. They walked over to the bag to examine its contents. The bag contained napkins, a book, a frying pan, bread, a knife, rope, and a wallet. Caleb found an ID in the bag in the name of Abison. He's not here. He assumed the owner of the ID was the original owner of the bag, and possibly one of the victims of the group they had killed. Caleb pondered the fate of the ID holder, the possibility of her death, or that the group abandoned and killed her. The GG noted that the bald leader had a basic knowledge of combat tactics, but was unprepared for Caleb's strategic abilities and his use of the environment. The guy wondered for a moment if he would have been killed if they had switched roles. Yeah, he'd probably be dead. Without the hourglass, he'd have a hard time. He quickly dismissed the thought, assuring himself that relying solely on strength or luck was not his style. Caleb then gathered his thoughts and told Yurnal that they should move on and leave this place. Caleb decided that he needed to create a precise strategy that left no room for error because his life was on the line. As he left, he continued to convince himself that what he was experiencing was now his reality, even if it felt like a game. 12 hours had passed without a break since their battle with the goblins, and Yurnal's face clearly showed fatigue. She was starting to run out of energy. Caleb noticed her fatigue and suggested they rest, which Yurnal was glad to do. They stopped and built a small fire to rest and warm up. They sat down very comfortably and cozily. Yurnal offered Caleb a piece of bread, thanking him for his help. Yurnal seemed touched, thanking Caleb for saving her life twice in one day, but he modestly replied that she had done most of the work. Yurnal suddenly remembered the previous group's offer to Caleb to leave her, and was horrified again just thinking about the possibility that he might have taken it. But Caleb firmly reassured her, confirming that he would never abandon a loyal comrade like her. Yurnal then asked Caleb to go to bed first while she was on guard, and he gratefully agreed. Suddenly, while resting, Caleb was awakened by a system notification that he had reached a new 3rd level and received additional points. He noticed that the wisdom points were still there, and decided to increase them even more, since he was used to focusing on wisdom when he played the game. Caleb pondered the matter, realizing that 13 wisdom points were required to pierce a goblin's shield. Yurnal had also gained a new level, so Caleb thought about allocating extra points for her as well to improve her abilities. When their vacation was over, Caleb woke up with the assurance that there was no going back to his old reality, and that he should fully embrace this new situation. He then told Yurnal that she could sleep now. She thanked him and happily went to bed, but she woke up suddenly and saw Caleb moving away from her, and she sleepily asked him what he was doing there. Caleb replied briefly that he was checking, without going into details. While Yurnal was still puzzled by his answer, Caleb pulled out his magic staff, and suddenly began casting a fireball spell. There was a powerful and deafening explosion, leaving Yurnal stunned and perplexed, and flames swept across the entire area. After Caleb conjured the fireball, he made sure that his power in the area was greatly increased compared to before, which made him realize that he wasn't in a simple dream, but in a real situation anyway. Yurnal was amazed when she saw Caleb break the shield with ease, and couldn't believe the immense power he possessed. Caleb decided to prepare for the next journey to find the exit portal. They packed their belongings for the morning and set out to find a way out of the frightening maze. Yurnal asked Caleb how long it might take to find the exit. Caleb replied that the location of the exit was completely random and entirely down to luck, sarcastically noting that his luck was terrible in such matters. GH anxiously added that finding the exit could take a whole week of careful searching. But he was soon surprised when they discovered an exit portal right in front of them, even though a group of other adventurers were already blocking the entrance. The guy noticed by their gear that they seemed to be a strong and experienced team, and realized he had to be careful in dealing with them. One of the group approached Caleb and Yurnal and asked if they were that team of slaves from the magical college. Caleb calmly answered in the affirmative, though he felt the situation had become a bit hostile. The red-haired Viking asked his co-worker Emma when the magical college sent that team of slaves to the labyrinth, and she replied that it was 10 o'clock in the morning. Viking marveled at how rare it was for a slave team to survive that long in the labyrinth, especially since the elf already had a bow. The girl was immediately frightened, and Caleb wielded a powerful magical staff with a fireball. Caleb confidently confirmed that he had a staff with a fireball, which impressed a strong-looking adventurer named Zikal. But Zikal said it was best not to linger here too long. Emma suggested that Caleb join them, saying that his apparent self-confidence made him a suitable candidate. The team discussed that the guy might be like Avison. That's not good. GH wondered if Avison was in their group and asked them if they had lost a comrade. The lowly adventurer explained that they had lost Avison then, during a fierce battle with a monster called the Black Wasp inside the labyrinth. The Viking was very sad. It was his favorite partner. Emma quickly intervened, explaining that Avison wasn't quite dead and could be revived if they could find a resurrection scroll. But the team realized that it was impossible to leave now to search for the scroll outside, and Emma insisted on making a quick decision. Caleb concluded that it was a room with an exit, but inside there was surely a maze boss who could not be defeated without a powerful mage. The team began discussing what kind of monster might be inside, ruling out undead because they had a priest on their team. They considered options such as a troll, a salamander, or a copper goat. Caleb quickly considered the possibility of the boss being a flying type of monster. If so, they would show some of the possibilities. After a quick analysis, Caleb clearly concluded that the boss in the room with the exit was a poisonous spider. The team was shocked at Caleb's ability to determine the type of boss with such speed and accuracy, puzzled at how a mere slave could know such a thing. Viking asked GH if he knew some information about the maze, and Caleb confidently replied that he knew something. He began to describe to them a poisonous spider, a terrifying monster that uses a poisonous web, a spider's web. Caleb explained that the spider moves at incredible speeds, attacking team members to paralyze them, causing them to slow down and go blind. He added that the moment an adventurer is caught in this spider's web, he becomes completely immobile, and the only way to defeat it is with a mage who can use fire spells. GH explained that the usual strategy is to set the ceiling of the room on fire, which causes the spider to come down and finish it off there. Caleb continued to speak confidently, assuring the group that they desperately needed him at this point. The group members readily agreed with his words, recognizing his intelligence and quick thinking. They finally decided and simultaneously invited Caleb and Yurnal to join their team, but Caleb declined, clearly and firmly. Everyone was surprised by Caleb's firm answer and didn't understand his flat refusal of what they thought was a good offer. Yurnal was deeply shocked by Caleb's sudden refusal and asked in bewilderment why he had turned down such a valuable opportunity. Caleb calmly replied that it was just a great opportunity to defeat the boss and get out of the maze. However, Caleb pointed out that there was an important problem that the group had failed to mention. He told the girl that this gate doesn't let in more than 4 people. Caleb then explained more details about the portal, clarifying that it was unstable, closing only 5 minutes after the first person enters. So the number of people who can pass through is very limited. Caleb continued his explanation more clearly, stating that he was the only one the group needed because of his magical abilities, which simply meant that the group was asking him to leave Yurnal here. Viking was surprised at Caleb's ability to analyze the situation so deeply, so he asked him his name again. The adventurer explained that the ideal situation would be to get them both out of the maze, but unfortunately, there was only one vacant seat in the group for the wizard. The Viking said he wished he could give Caleb a chance to get out alive, but unfortunately he couldn't take Yurnal with him. A heavy silence descended on everyone because of the clarity and complexity of this request, especially when a look of shock and fear appeared on Yurnal's face. She looked at Caleb with intense anxiety, whispering his name in a voice shaking with fear and worry. At this point, GH began to think deeply, realizing that their offer was very tempting, but then he would remain a slave and be taken back. And this group would most likely not help him after they got out. After deep thought, Caleb decided with firm determination that he could not leave Yurnal under any circumstances, and that he would not abandon his trusted companion. The entire group was shocked by Caleb's determined and clear answer. The protagonist said that he had no intention of leaving Yurnal alone. Instead, he smiled, and then decided to make an alternative suggestion to the group, explaining that they could hire them. The Viking were stunned and confused by this sudden offer, and asked in disbelief, "Is he choosing money over the gate?" And since that was the case, the redhead quickly asked, "How much do they want?" Caleb announced with great confidence that the required fee was 10,000 gold, which stunned everyone, especially Yurnal. It was too much after all. But Caleb was fully aware of this fact, calculating that the treasure they had collected so far in one day was worth about 2,000 gold pieces. He also took into account the ransom required to free himself and Yurnal, which amounted to 6,000 gold pieces, and that the remaining sum would be enough to cover potential unforeseen expenses. The adventurers discussed the matter amongst themselves, a little hesitant about the high sum requested, but they also realized that they had no other choice because of their dire need for a mage. At this point, Caleb realized that his main leverage in these negotiations was Abysson's presence, and that they desperately needed to act before her body began to decompose. And GH smiled. They would have to accept his terms. The adventurers looked visibly upset when one of them angrily confirmed that they didn't have time to think and look for another mage. Caleb offered to confirm the agreement with a formal oath similar to that of a priest, suggesting they swear before a goddess named Nathaniel. Emma quickly agreed, confirming that an oath taken before a goddess could never be broken. Negotiations began in earnest over the amount. The Viking offered 9,000 gold pieces, but Caleb cleverly raised the price to 9,500 gold, which impressed Yernal with his audacity. Negotiations over the price between Caleb and the adventurer continued, but eventually the Viking agreed to it. Despite the adventurer's hesitation, he reluctantly agreed, and Priestess Emma invited them to join the team. Everyone stood before the exit portal, and Priestess Emma began to formally announce the terms of the contract, proclaiming the agreement in the name of the goddess Nathaniel. The adventurer team will hire Caleb and Yernal for 9,500 gold, provided the adventurer team exits through the portal. If either party is destroyed, the contract will be cancelled. Emma asked the representatives of both teams to make a formal oath in front of everyone. Both officially affirmed the oath. The teams then proceeded to complete the mission, heading together to the next room. The team entered the room, which was dark and filled with thick cobwebs, which made Caleb cautious as he expected traps. Caleb quickly noticed neutral objects scattered in the corners of the room. They were the explosive boxes that adventurers sometimes use to escape crisis situations. Caleb warned the group about the cobwebs on the floor, explaining that it was very sticky and would get in the way. Viking pointed out that they just needed to set the cobwebs on the ceiling on fire to make it come down. But at that moment, everyone was surprised by a swift attack from above. The boss spider appeared suddenly and intimidatingly. The spider began to shoot its web at an incredible speed towards the team, causing panic among them. The Viking fought it off. The adventurer yelled at Caleb to use the fireball. The boss spider clearly appeared on the ceiling and began to quickly attack the team, which made the GG realize that the opportunity to attack him was now. Caleb realized that he only had a limited chance to deal a powerful blow to the spider, and that he had to deal as much damage as possible in a single moment. Very quickly, Caleb used his special ability, the hourglass, and launched 4 fireballs in a row at the spider. The flames spread massively throughout the area, creating huge explosions that engulfed the entire place in flames. The spider took direct hits and shrieked in pain from the force of the explosion and the burning of its web. The adventurers were stunned by Caleb's power, perplexed as to how he managed to make 4 fireballs at once without a verbal spell. The fire was still spreading as well. Caleb shouted, warning the team to focus, as this was their only chance to do as much damage to the spider as possible. He then quickly called out to Yernal to aim her arrows at the spider at the right moment. Yernal accurately and quickly released her arrows towards the spider, in perfect conjunction with Caleb's fire attack. The attack continued relentlessly, but Caleb suddenly realized that a normal bow would not be effective against a boss as strong as the spider. There was another explosion of energy. Gigi immediately asked Priestess Emma to prepare a magical shield to protect the team from the spider's upcoming attacks. Guy led the team, telling them to attack as soon as the magical shield was up. However, he expressed his displeasure at being ordered around by some sucker. The adventurers rushed to attack after the magic shield was ready, quickly heading towards the spider, which was coming out of the smoke. The adventurers were able to attack the spider. The battle began to escalate furiously, with the adventurers launching sudden and synchronized jump attacks on the boss spider. The spider grew angrier and more ferocious, falling backwards with no legs but activating his stomach. One of the adventurers realized the spider was preparing for a powerful venomous attack and quickly summoned the priestess Emma to activate an additional protective shield. At this critical moment, Caleb realized that the best solution to stop the spider's venomous attack was to freeze it before it could release the venom. That's when he unleashed his ice spike forward. The ice spear pierced the spider's venom sac with incredible speed, hastily freezing it and diffusing the deadly attack. The priestess was glad the kid had done well, and GH yelled for them to move on, but the dwarf started questioning him about something. But they hesitated, so Caleb shouted in anger, demanding that she do his bidding immediately, especially at this critical moment. It drove him crazy compared to the ease of controlling characters in games. The dwarf quickly rushed to the attack, noticing that Caleb had a sharp, nervous temper. He swung his axe in a powerful and precise attack towards the spider, taking advantage of the opportunity Caleb had created. The dwarf shouted, announcing his special attack, Tin Man, and hit the spider with devastating force, causing serious damage. The spider seemed completely exhausted after the powerful attack, and the team breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the battle was over. He then picked up his axe and began to celebrate. Caleb noted to himself with surprise that these people probably didn't realize the reality of the situation, as they didn't realize that the poisonous spider was the boss in this clash. Caleb continued to monitor the situation closely, knowing that the chance of a second phase was very slim. But the possibility existed under the circumstances. The team was celebrating their false victory, but Yernal noticed Caleb standing motionless. Caleb was holding his magic staff and looked extremely tense, which made her anxiously ask what was going on. Yernal looked up and was immediately horrified when she realized that the battle was not yet over. She cried out in terror, "Caleb, there's something up there." The adventurers tried to see what Yernal was pointing at, but the darkness upstairs made it hard to see anything. Suddenly the ceiling began to shake, and it was covered in spider eggs, and there were clear signs that something dangerous was happening. The team was in shock, as they were not prepared for Phase 2, and had no idea what was going to happen next. Caleb gave an urgent order to Yernal, telling her to roll the explosive barrel as hard as she could to the designated location. Yernal reacted quickly, and forcefully rolled the barrel despite her intense anxiety. The dwarf was confused by Caleb's request to throw the explosive barrel, stating that he didn't know where to aim. Caleb quickly intervened and ordered Priestess Emma to cast weapon light on Yernal's arrow to clearly mark the spot. The priestess quickly cast the required spell, allowing Yernal to fire her glowing arrow. Yernal shot the arrow into the ceiling with force and precision, illuminating the desired area perfectly. The team could clearly see the location of the spider eggs above, and immediately knew where to aim the explosive barrel. The barrel was thrown toward the target at high velocity, and began climbing toward the spider eggs. Caleb seized the moment, reactivated his hourglass ability, and launched a fireball spell at the barrel. The barrel exploded with tremendous force, causing massive damage to the spider's eggs. The adventurers were amazed at Caleb's incredible skills, as he cast the spell with lightning speed and without a verbal incantation, wondering in amazement if it was always that easy. The adventurers realized that even though Caleb was a slave, his magical talents and abilities were truly amazing, making them wonder where such an exceptional magician had come from. At this moment, an exit portal finally clearly appeared in front of everyone, heralding the end of the battle and the team's success. With the spider eggs destroyed, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. Caleb thought to himself that although fighting a team of professional adventurers was easy, you can't control everything like in a game. Suddenly, one of the adventurers approached Caleb, and with obvious nervousness asked him who he really was, wondering what he was all about. The adventurer's tone quickly changed, expressing his amazement and deep admiration for the hero. He jokingly asked if Caleb was trying to kill them all with his excessive strength, emphasizing how impressed he was with his performance. Caleb replied with sarcastic humility, saying that if he had seriously thought about it beforehand, he could have easily taken the portal for himself. The dwarf approached, recognizing that these were skills not befitting his status as a common slave. He asked about his past. Caleb felt a bit embarrassed, suddenly remembering that before he was here, he was just a video game addict. In the end, Caleb decided not to reveal his true identity, and said that he was just an ordinary slave from the Magic Academy. The adventurer kept pressing him, but Caleb just calmly replied that everyone has their own story. Yernal let out a huge sigh of relief, as she didn't expect them to get out of this battle uninjured. The gnome adventurer agreed, confirming that he hadn't expected that either. The gnome laughingly admitted that he only agreed to the contract because he expected them to die quickly, so he wasn't too concerned about the amount Caleb had asked for. Although the exit portal was clearly in front of them, the gnome warned them that it wasn't the end, which surprised everyone and increased their fears of what might happen next. Caleb then confirmed to her that this wasn't the end, because the contract stipulated that the final payment would happen in the village. The priestess explained that the terms of the contract required the entire group to go through the exit portal. Yernal's face showed clear signs of shock. She asked in amazement, as the portal had already appeared before them. The priestess regretfully explained that contracts made before the goddess of justice must be honored exactly as written. She added that both Yernal and Caleb must pass through the portal for the condition of the contract to be fully fulfilled. Yurnal was horrified and asked with great fear what would happen if they couldn't get out. Priestess Emma sternly told them that if they couldn't get out, the contract would be considered completely voided, as if the entire crew had been killed. Caleb realized that this rule was designed to hurt those who couldn't make it back. Yurnil asked him if he knew this beforehand, and he calmly confirmed that he knew that large contracts were usually made outside the labyrinth. The other adventurer realized why the dwarf had agreed to 9,500 gold so easily, commenting sarcastically on the strange decision. The wolf told Caleb to be sure to return alive to steal the gnome's wallet. At this point, Caleb stopped to look at the bag he had found earlier, and realized it belonged to one of the team's missing companions. The team was very surprised to find out that the bag belonged to Abyssine, their missing friend. They then realized the reason for Abyssine's disappearance, suggesting that another group might have attacked her and stolen her belongings. The heroes were shocked at this fate. The gnome adventurer offered to give Caleb a reward for returning the bag, but Caleb said he only wanted the bag itself, no monetary compensation. The gnome was surprised that the guy didn't want money, and suggested that if Caleb wanted the bag, he should give up its personal contents, which Gigi didn't hesitate to agree to. He asked, would they be going back? The priestess confirmed that they had already used one resurrection scroll, and that Abyssine was in fact already dying. The dwarf expressed his disappointment in Abyssine, and said that it would have been better if Caleb had joined them from the beginning. Caleb smiled defiantly and told them he would ask for a larger sum next time, which made the team laugh. Finally, Yurnal nervously raised her hand and gently asked the team to take Caleb with them, out of this maze right now. The entire team was surprised by Yurnal's request to take him with her. They turned to her with obvious amazement and shock. Even Caleb himself had not expected this. Yurnal quickly explained that if only one person successfully escaped the labyrinth, the entire team would not be considered destroyed, so the contract would remain in effect. She said that Caleb would receive his full reward, be freed from his slave status, and be able to use his remaining funds to better equip himself. But Priestess Emma strongly opposed this, explaining that Yurnal could not survive alone in the labyrinth for even a day, and that even a skilled mage like Caleb could barely make it through. Yurnal felt sad, assuring everyone that she was fully aware of the situation and did not expect to live to see another day. She was ready to take full responsibility for her decision and asked Caleb not to stay for her. Yurnil remembered the monsters and the people who had died in the maze or tried to kill them, and assured Caleb that she would feel very guilty if she caused his death. Tears began to well up in Yurnal's eyes, and she silently begged Caleb not to live in regret because of her, thanking him for everything he'd done for her. Her body trembled. She begged him to move on with his life for both of their sakes. The dwarf intervened gravely, saying that it was not customary to expel a member of the group after passing through the exit portal. The gnome apologized to Yurnal, admitting that he had previously treated her simply as a criminal slave and had not considered her feelings. But now things have clearly changed, and he wants to treat Caleb and Yurnal as official members of the team, so he has an offer for them. The gnome offered Caleb a permanent spot on the team, promising him a 25% share of the profits in addition to the full 9,500 gold reward. Caleb felt the offer was so generous that it made him hesitate for a few moments. Yurnil quickly intervened, grabbing Caleb by the arm and telling him that she would somehow manage it, and that he didn't have to die because of her. A window appeared in front of Caleb, informing him that if he stayed by Yurnil's side in this situation, her trust level in him would increase by 100%. Caleb began to consider his options. Should he save Yurnil, or should he immediately escape the maze and join a professional team? Caleb thought about the possibilities of using this unique ability to help Yurnil survive, but he realized that the commands he could issue through her might not be enough. But at the crucial moment, Caleb gave a direct and simple command. Yurnil, cast your strongest arrow to test the effectiveness of the ability. Caleb found that only one action point was spent on this command, which made him optimistic about using this ability strategically in the future. He paused for a moment to decide which path he should take, realizing the gravity of the decision that now faced him. The choice became obvious. Either expand the hourglass ability to develop Yurnil's skills as a talented archer, Zarinia, or leave the maze immediately and join a professional team. Caleb's move ended when a clear choice appeared in front of him, but he hesitated for a bit before announcing his decision. Caleb finally announced that he had chosen to escape the maze with Yurnil, and asked the team of adventurers to go through the portal as planned. Yurnil and the others were stunned by Caleb's sudden decision, and there were cries of amazement among them as they wondered in disbelief if he was really serious about his choice. Caleb firmly stated that he was absolutely serious and that he would have made the same decision even if it was just a game. GH was thinking long-term, and that leaving behind a loyal comrade like Yernil was not an acceptable option for him. Yernil felt anger and confusion as she asked him, "Why doesn't he just leave?" Caleb replied firmly that he would rather take his chances with her than live his life in regret. The adventurers were deeply moved by Caleb's stance, so much so that one of them expressed his deep admiration, calling him a truly great man in a loud and admiring voice. Priestess Emma realized that this time the Magic Academy had found someone exceptional, a true talent. Priestess Emma intervened, breaking the emotional atmosphere with a question about their plan to defeat the next portal boss. Caleb ignored her question for a moment and suddenly asked if they could take the spider's corpse with them, much to the surprise and anger of the dwarf Bertinen. Caleb insisted, explaining to everyone that he would buy it from them for the right price. The gnome quickly agreed, stating that his minimum price was 3,000 gold, and Caleb accepted the offer without hesitation. The gnome then tried to remember Yernil's name, hesitantly asking if her name was Britnil, which infuriated Yernil and prompted her to correct him again with obvious anger. But the dwarf ignored her anger and sincerely wished them a safe return, giving Yernil a small tool as support and encouragement. The other adventurer also joked with Yernil, telling her to make good use of the tool, but used Britnil's name again, causing her to shout her correct name once more to the laughter of the others. Priestess Emma, for her part, told Caleb to contact her in town to collect his financial reward. Emma then prayed in the name of the goddess Nathaniel for Caleb and Yarniel, asking her to watch over them and bless their way out of the maze. The experienced team then left first for the exit portal, wishing them luck. The adventurer Zikal reminded them of his name, wishing them safety. The dwarf then took the monolith in his hands and tossed it through the portal, then turned to another glowing red portal, advising from behind that if any of them managed to survive and make it back to the city, they should look for it in the Adventurers Guild. As he left, the dwarf Bertinin confirmed that he was fully confident that they would manage to survive and that he would continue to wait for their return. After everyone had left, Yernil collapsed to the ground and turned to Caleb and worriedly asked him the reason for his decision. She couldn't hide her fear of facing the next boss alone, wondering how they would ever be able to defeat him without help. Caleb calmly reassured her, confirming that his body and mind, which had spent years depending on games, had already accurately calculated the possibilities. Caleb approached Yernil, asking her not to cry and assured her that they could get through this together, suggesting that they start by collecting spider weapons to improve their strength. Yernil explained that she wasn't trying to relax. She said that she was fully prepared to do whatever the protagonist ordered. The girl pulled out a spider spike and offered to use it as a shield if need be. She turned around and asked the GH, "Wouldn't it be faster to collect the spider's fangs together?" The guy said there was a reason for that, so the girl continued to chisel the rock further. GH realized that the success of retrieving the item depended on the agility score. Yernil was quick at the task, surprised to find a great talent for such missions. Caleb knew he needed to learn his new expansion ability and prepare himself for the battles ahead. He found that Yernil's trust level in him had reached 100%, which meant that he could now issue more complex commands. Caleb quickly tested Yernil's abilities by asking her to shoot 10 arrows at once while performing a quick triple axel. Yernil did a brilliant job of executing this command, which made Caleb more quickly realize the limits and possibilities of this new ability. She celebrated her great success with great enthusiasm after she managed to extract the spider's fangs. The girl asked him to move on, for she would be able to make poisoned arrows on the way. The girl was pleased that she had discovered such a talent. Caleb was relieved to see her smile after moments of extreme stress. Caleb then asked her to combine the poisonous fangs with the arrows to create special poison arrows that would help them in the upcoming battle. Despite being fully prepared, Yernil had some doubts about the effectiveness of this new method of combat, since she had not been able to do damage earlier. Caleb explained to her that the problem was the quality of her equipment, and that it was mostly about the tools she possessed. He assured her that all they needed to do now was improve the arrows, because making new bows was much more difficult. The girl began to create poison arrows, realizing that this method could give her immense power even with a normal bow. After Yernil started making poison arrows, Caleb told her that he was counting on her. Despite her low level, Yurnal quickly surprised him with her quick and easy success in preparing arrows. It amazed Caleb and made him wonder how she did it. Yurnal simply told him that she had only touched, and the result was a stunning success in preparing high-quality poison arrows. Caleb was amazed at Yurnal's success and advised her not to use those arrows unless he gave her a direct signal during the battle. Caleb then decided to test a new feature added to his hourglass, which allowed him to give specific commands to Yurnal during his turn. As an initial test, Caleb asked her to take a water bottle out of her bag and give it to him. Caleb was surprised to notice that this simple command did not consume any of his own action points. Yurnal gave the water to Caleb and he asked, why did she choose to do that? She explained that she felt he might need it because he suddenly looked hyped and thirsty. After this successful experiment, Caleb began to think of the best way to strategically utilize this new feature in his life. They moved confidently toward the next battle, and Caleb used his hourglass ability again, giving Yurnal clear orders to coordinate a joint attack. Caleb used a fireball spell to finish off one and asked his companion to shoot the other in the leg, while Yurnal shot a poison arrow at one of the monsters to quickly destroy the other. The flames quickly reached the goblin, as it also pierced his knee through his leg. Immediately, GH pointed his wand at the goblin's head and shot a fireball at it. Caleb was surprised to notice that Yurnal was aiming for the monster's leg and not its head, and when he asked her why, she simply told him that the leg was an easier target. Caleb began to notice a distinct pattern. If he gave a direct order to Yurnal while he was using his ability, but he also realized that the commands had to match Yurnal's personality and abilities, and not strongly contradict her personal nature. Caleb decided to test the limits of this ability again by issuing strange commands, like asking Yurnal to breakdance. But nothing happened because of the strangeness of the request. Caleb once again asked Yurnal to perform any dance she wanted. This time she was able to follow the command with ease, which made him realize more clearly the nature of his new ability. But the girl hesitated upon seeing his focused face. After Caleb had a better understanding of the hourglass ability, they confidently moved on. He decided to use the time to find out more information. Caleb gave a new command, using his ability, and changed the girl's mood, asking Yurnal to tell him everything she knew about him before they entered the labyrinth. Yurnal began to reminisce, saying that she did wonder how he ended up a slave, mentioning that she thought he might have been involved in a murder. Caleb was so shocked by what she said that he almost choked with surprise and asked her, "What?" Yurnal asked if he was all right. She expected him to be scary, but he wasn't. She was sure he had his own personal reasons for doing the deed, and explained that she assumed he might have been involved in the murder of a member of the fox tribe, Foxen. Yurnal explained that Foxen were half human and half fox, possessing a special charm and appeal. Yurnal argued with anger and passion that she was sure that the Foxen girl that Caleb might have killed had done something terrible, and that the guy had a reason. Caleb explained that the case was much more complicated than that, and a lot had happened to him before he'd gotten here. Yurnal remembered that Caleb was probably a labyrinth explorer from a distant city in the east, since every slave team at a magical academy is assigned at least one experienced explorer. Yurnal felt immense gratitude that Caleb was an experienced explorer on their team, realizing how lucky they were. And the guy finally realized what he had been like before the obsession. They walked on and rounded a bend. The girl saw something and was surprised. That's when they finally saw the exit portal right in front of them. Caleb became more and more cautious as they approached the portal, as it seemed highly suspicious to find the next exit so quickly. Doubt crept into him, and he began to tell himself that they couldn't have been so lucky. As they entered the room, Yurnal pointed to a corner, asking Caleb to look in that direction. There, they saw a man lying on the floor. They walked over together and found that it was Abison, who was in a strange state that suggested his soul was still intact. Yurnal assumed from his noble appearance that he belonged to a wealthy family. Caleb commented to himself that this type of magic was certainly very expensive and unavailable to ordinary slaves like them. As for Yurnal, she was extremely amazed as this was the first time she had seen such magic. Taking a closer look, Caleb noticed something even more suspicious. Abison was missing a leg. He asked, "Were there any sounds of monsters nearby?" and asked Yurnal to keep an eye out for anything else they might see or hear. Yurnal reacted to this scene with a strong sense of disgust, expressing how disgusted she was by what she saw. At this point, Caleb asked her if she could hear it, but she denied it, saying that she did not hear any such sound. Caleb realized that the monster that had attacked Abison was not a black wasp, and he became even more worried. thinking it couldn't be far away, since these monsters don't leave their prey easily. The boy suggested checking the source of the noise. Yernal calmly clarified that they didn't need to go far, pointing out that the sound they were looking for was coming from a certain spot in the room, and she drew Caleb's attention to that particular spot. They soon discovered that the source was a large black wasp larva. At first, the larva seemed small and harmless, but Caleb quickly realized that this larva could become a serious threat, especially if it managed to devour the corpse of someone as powerful as Abysin. Suddenly, Caleb was struck with real fear as he remembered something he had heard before. He then turned to Yernal and anxiously asked if she had heard any rumors about the disappearance of the Seekers. Yernal confirmed that she had indeed heard of an attack from the back, where an entire team of adventurers had been wiped out by the trap, and Caleb's face showed clear signs of worry. Anxiety gripped Yernal, and she asked Caleb what was going on, but he ignored her question and asked her an unexpected one, asking if she had ever heard of a possessed adventurer. Yernal was very surprised and said she had never heard of such a thing, and Caleb confirmed to her that it was very rare in the labyrinths. Caleb realized that things could get a lot worse very quickly, especially because a ghostly adventurer could come back to life in the maze to attack others. Caleb began to tense up, realizing that their situation had become much more complicated and confusing than he had expected. A deep fear of something terrible took hold of Yernal, and she asked Caleb in a trembling voice if they were doomed. Caleb felt like he'd made a big mistake by letting Yernal see how tense he was. To reassure her, Caleb reassured her by telling her that although the situation was bad, they were capable of handling it, urging her not to worry. Her confidence gradually returned to her after GH earnestly assured her that he would not let any harm come to her, and that they would surely survive. The scene shifted to the inn. The dwarf Bertanin was talking to the tavern owner, confirming to him that he had witnessed something strange and unbelievable in his last adventure. It was Caleb's ability to use magic with incredible speed without casting spells. The tavern owner downplayed it, saying that such events were very rare and happened once every 100 years, which made Bertanin a little angry. Either way, the bartender was glad the dwarf had returned alive. He was served a drink that Bertanin hadn't ordered, and the tavern owner couldn't resist a sarcastic joke, asking if he ordered it without casting a spell, hinting at the strangeness of his story. The dwarf drank the beer. The tavern owner asked him about Zikal's performance, and Berthanin said he was good despite his lack of experience. He was beginning to think that Zikal could be a great adventurer in the future. Bertanin chuckled, saying that Zikal was a long way from the legendary hero, Mr. Punch in the Spine, who had saved an entire team earlier. While Bertanin sat with his companions in the tavern, chatting and laughing, a woman suddenly burst in, shouting and asking if the dwarf among them was Bertanin himself. She asked them impatiently and anxiously about her son, Abysinus, asking if he was dead. Bertanin sadly stood up and confirmed to her that the lad had indeed died after traveling alone to find a way out and being stung by a black wasp. Events in the tavern heated up as Abyssin's mother was devastated to hear the news of her son's death. She expressed her shock and anger, reproaching Bertanin for not taking good care of him, while her other son tried to calm her down. The young man continued to try to defuse the situation by explaining that no one was to blame for Abyssin's death. He emphasized the need to focus on the problem and reminded the dwarf that he should probably have a backup plan to save Abyssin. The gnome explained that the soul-saving magic would work for a full week, indicating that there would be no problem resurrecting Abyssinus. Bertanin specified that the resurrection scroll would arrive in 2 or 3 days, and noted the need for them to depart at that time. He wondered if they would be able to find Abyssinus quickly. Bertanin confirmed that he was using a special team to find Abyssin, showed the ID he'd gotten from Caleb, and mentioned that a genius magician had found him. The tavern owner explained that Caleb, despite being a slave, could use magic quickly and without spells. Abyssin's brother interrupted them, claiming that this was no time for jokes, and suggested that they rely on the genius mage to retrieve Abyssin's body. Bertanin mentioned that the team consisted of only 2 men. Clarence, Abyssinus's brother, objected strongly, expressing his sarcasm at the idea of a team consisting of only 2 slaves, and insisted on forming a full crew, whatever it took to quickly retrieve Abyssinus's body. The payment is immeasurable. Suddenly, some visitor approached them and asked, exactly how much are they willing to pay for this assignment? A strong and intimidating-looking level 3 adventurer appeared, offering his services, though they were not as cool as the dwarf. Clarence responded angrily, demanding that the adventurer shut up and trying to stop him from continuing to provoke. The adventurer quickly retreated, gripped by fear, as he sought to preserve his life by any means necessary. Clarence insisted that relying on money alone would attract more such adventurers, and his mother asked, what to do then? Clarence announced his intention to go on his own with Bertanin to find Abyssin, which surprised the mistress of the family. However, Bertanin welcomed the idea, thinking that having a level 5 mage with them would be very useful. But the eldest son said he decided to bring his brother back himself, and expressed great interest in the genius mage Bertanin mentioned. Elsewhere in the labyrinth, Caleb gave serious thought and told Yurnal that perhaps they should surrender. Yurnal expressed her surprise, while Caleb explained that they were waiting for a group of dwarves or their food might run out in just 2 days. Meanwhile, a dangerous black wasp larva has appeared. It acts as a boss and its odor repels other monsters. Caleb argued that if the larva stopped spreading its odor, the other monsters would immediately attack. They should move faster. Caleb continued his analysis of the situation, explaining that waiting is a big risk, and that the solution was to move quickly and cautiously, as they didn't have enough strength for a direct confrontation with Bek-O-Tek, the master of backstabbing. Yurnal expressed her concern by asking Caleb if they were really capable of overcoming a backstabbing attack. He replied with feigned confidence that there was a way, but it was a very difficult one. Yurnal showed her enthusiasm and determination, assuring him that she was willing to do anything Caleb asked. Caleb answered her firmly, emphasizing the need to execute a complex and harsh strategy and urging her to be fully prepared. They began to execute the brutal battle plan, attacking the monsters with great force, using all their abilities in perfect coordination. Caleb calmly and confidently stated that complacency was no longer an option, and that they must destroy every monster that got in their way. Caleb stated in a harsh tone that they would kill 100 goblins or more that way, which made Yurnal realize the seriousness of his intentions. Gigi jumped up and rushed forward, casting fireballs with one wand and roasting the dwarves and preparing lightning attacks with the other. The dwarves were quickly eliminated and killed by these attacks. The girl also kept up and used her bow to attack the remaining or nimble goblins. It was something she was very good at. Caleb explained the importance of reaching level 5 quickly, stating that it was the maximum for the first floor, and that you have to kill poisonous monsters to get the experience you need. Caleb emphasized the importance of level 5 as a starting point for acquiring basic combat skills that will help them in future battles, pointing out that there is a clear strategy for this. He would only collect the most useful magic stones and discard the rest. Caleb continued with his plan, specifying that the next objective was to destroy the goblin shaman, to which Yurnal showed her full readiness. GH explained the need to find the resurrection scroll quickly by destroying the shaman, and they began to move faster and more determined. After a long and grueling battle, they sat down by the fire to rest. Caleb praised Yurnal's performance, confirming that their preparations for the upcoming clash were finally complete. With obvious exhaustion, Yurnal realized that the larva's breathing was getting weaker, just like her own. It appeared that the larva was on the verge of death because it hadn't eaten in days and would probably die by tomorrow. After a moment of silence, Yurnal worriedly asked if they should feed Abyssin to the larva so they could stay alive. Caleb was taken aback by her sudden question and said they still needed him. Caleb warned her of the danger of harming a spiritually preserved body, as that was a grave sin, but they were lucky to find everything they needed in time. Yurnal was surprised and asked him what he was doing at that moment. Caleb replied that he was filling a barrel of water with special stones, which was an integral part of his plan. At that, Yurnal felt a great sense of relief, as she was finally close to getting some rest. Yurnal suggested to Caleb that they take turns being on sleep watch, and the boy immediately said he would sleep first. However, there was a faint doubt in Yurnal's mind, and Caleb said he needed to sleep for level and strategy planning. Caleb suddenly decided that instead of sleeping, he would continue on duty for another half hour, and informed Yurnal of his decision. Yurnal was very happy and thanked him for his sudden decision to stay awake for a while longer. She wished him a good night's rest, but to herself he was a little surprised at the unexpected dark side of Yurnal's character that he had recently discovered. Caleb then entered a state of rest and told Yurnal to wake him up in 2.5 hours. While he was resting, a notification appeared that he had entered the resting state and that both he and Yurnal had upgraded well over the past 2 days. Continuing on their way, Caleb indicated that they were approaching the last room with an exit. Yurnal replied with obvious concern that she didn't doubt him, but wondered about the seriousness of his plan. Caleb told her never to doubt him, that what she was seeing wasn't everything, and that his plan to defeat the boss was still on track and hadn't changed. Yernal was a little embarrassed and said that she didn't mean to question him. She was just wondering if the clothes and gear would really help him out. Caleb suddenly appeared in black wasp egg armor, explaining to her that black wasp eggs were extremely durable and would provide him with excellent protection. They gathered their wits and confidently moved towards the final boss room, ready for the anticipated battle. As soon as they entered the room, they were surprised by the boss who was preparing to meet them. But he was different and more ferocious than they expected. Caleb didn't hesitate and confidently challenged the boss. The boss smiled and began to chuckle softly. There were red marks on his skin. Caleb was surprised by the boss's suspicious smirk as he looked at them, preparing to start the battle. The boss launched his attack with great power and speed, and they tried to dodge his furious attacks using their skills and quick movements. Caleb suddenly noticed that the boss was using a special skill called back jump attack, which made him pay attention and move quickly to block the attack in time. Caleb realized that the boss was now right behind him, but he had already anticipated this move, preparing to counterattack with a well-thought-out plan. Caleb gave a direct order to Yernal to use the water to immediately attack the boss as he fell from shock. They attacked together, coherently and accurately on the boss, which was hit hard thanks to Caleb and Yernal's perfect coordination. The boss was subjected to very powerful attacks with a bucket of water, which confused him a lot and made him retreat a bit because of the force of the blow. They took the opportunity again, with Yernal unleashing a straight water jet at the boss. Caleb finished his attack by launching an ice spike spell at the boss in an attempt to end the battle quickly. But the boss used a special skill called Shadow Leap, an ability that allows him to flee the scene of an attack with incredible speed. Caleb realized that the boss had no movement skills left. Immediately ordered Yarnil to use the electric arrow to hit the water barrel he was about to lift into the air. Yarnil reacted with astonishing speed and fired a precise electric arrow into the barrel, and the water splashed all over the cave, hitting the boss as well. Caleb took another moment and cast the ice spike spell again, unleashing a devastating attack on the water and the boss. As a result of this powerful attack, they were able to temporarily immobilize the boss, as he was suddenly paralyzed and unable to move for a while. The GG realized that the entire space was in ice and wondered what his opponent would do now, expecting him to use special movement skills. Suddenly, his opponent attacked him from an unexpected place, shattering his egg armor, and Yernal screamed his name in horror. Yernal asked Caleb with great concern if he was all right. He quickly reassured her, confirming that he had miraculously escaped injury. He admitted to himself that this was the first time he had used this strategy, but was grateful for the effectiveness of the shield he carried. Just then, he noticed a magical throwing dagger being thrown at him. He was lucky, for the great distance reduced its destructive power. The opponent grasped his sword and tried to launch another furious attack, but Caleb predicted his opponent's next move and decided to prepare for a vanishing attack. Caleb quickly gave his instructions to Yernal to locate the disappearing opponent. Yernal managed to locate the source of the next attack and yelled enthusiastically to indicate that he was here, then fired an arrow at high speed, directly towards the enemy's location. The attack successfully hit the enemy, but he was able to quickly dodge, giving him even more opportunity to counterattack. He picked up some sort of thing that looked like a grenade and pulled it out from behind his belt. During the collision, Caleb noticed it and realized that the hourglass determining his progress still hadn't recharged. Caleb smiled confidently, ignoring it, and said that he had been waiting for this for a long time. He activated the ice spike right on the larva, and in a second she was finished. That was how long they had been messing with her. The attack was effective, and it allowed Caleb to greatly increase his level at this critical moment. Suddenly, Caleb found that he had gained a new special ability called Kill Pulse, a powerful combat skill. After using the new ability, Caleb was able to defeat his opponent with amazing ease and recover 2 points. He was surprised at how the game conditions had changed from normal, causing him to reevaluate the situation. Then Caleb noticed another opponent a few meters away and decided not to hesitate to attack again, taking advantage of the situation. Despite his fatigue, Caleb hoped that his plan to give his opponent a quick strike would succeed. He quickly prepared for his next attack using the lightning skill, hoping that this time the attack would be decisive. Caleb launched his attack using lightning. The strike was powerful and loud, causing serious damage to his opponent. In the next moment, the area exploded with tremendous force as a result of his intense attack, adding to the power and ferocity of the battle. In this decisive moment, Caleb confirmed with full confidence that his skills as a marksman had always been at a high level, even when he was in the army. With great excitement, Caleb asked the girl about the location of the enemy, and he quickly pointed to the right place. Caleb threw another powerful icy blow in the direction indicated, and this one again hit the target with precision. The enemy was clearly hurt by the powerful ice strike, and Caleb realized that this was the perfect moment for a decisive strike. He shouted to Urnil not to hesitate and to attack immediately. Urnil immediately complied with his request and fired a very precise electric arrow directly at the stunned opponent, making the situation even more tense. Since the opponent was suffering greatly, Caleb convinced himself that this was the last battle, and regardless of the enemy's level, this was the decisive moment to defeat him for good. The guy made sure that exposing himself to the enemy would deal continuous damage to him for at least 20 seconds, reinforcing the effectiveness of his strategy. But something was wrong as he realized that even a few seconds in a battle like this could be crucial to victory or defeat. He waited for the boss to stop resisting and die. Suddenly there was an explosion at the place of his almost defeated opponent. Caleb decided not to hesitate and told Urnil to immediately proceed with Plan B. Urnil was shocked, for Caleb had hoped that it wouldn't come to this alternative plan, but he was fully prepared for such a situation. At that moment, Caleb realized why possessed adventurers were so dangerous. They could utilize the special, powerful skills of adventurers. But he had prepared for this difficult battle and was glad that he had a backup plan in case of such harsh conditions. Earlier, Caleb had calmly assessed the situation and told Urnil to release only one poisoned arrow to begin with to see the result. Urnil hesitated, pondering whether to use both arrows at once to guarantee victory. Caleb began to doubt his opponent because of his claim that he had single-handedly defeated the Black Wasp without any help. He felt there was something suspicious about the story, and wondered if back attack had the ability to heal or resist poison. After all, despite his excellent skill in movement and speed, he couldn't defeat the Black Wasp without getting a scratch from the poison. The opponent was probably poisoned but not dead because he possessed some method or means to survive the poison. Urnil wondered if that meant their opponent could cure poison, but Caleb denied it, saying that their opponent was an outcast, not a mage, and therefore wouldn't use magic. The guy ruled out all the easy options, suggesting that the one most likely had a special ability. Gigi explained to Urnil that their first priority was to confirm if their opponent had an antidote. Urnil became worried and asked if that meant the end of the battle for them. Caleb smiled confidently and said no, confirming that it was time to put Plan B into action, and we were back on the battlefield. The enemy started activating a special ability called Adrenaline Rush, which allowed him to recover most of his health and regain energy. The enemy suddenly lunged at Caleb, jumping on top of him with a swift and brutal attack. Caleb was surprised and realized that the battle wasn't over yet, and the hourglass still had 3 more seconds to reload. Urnil anxiously asked if she could fire now, but Caleb told her to wait a little longer and not to fire immediately. Caleb noticed that the enemy had activated a movement skill to dodge the next attack, and realized that he needed to act quickly to get Urnil out of the way of the attack and successfully execute Plan B. Caleb quickly and gracefully jumped to a better position, ready to execute his next plan at the right moment. From his new position, Caleb cast a lightning spell on his opponent, in an attempt to stop his movements. The enemy fiercely counterattacked and moved with great speed to avoid the lightning spell, displaying his superior fighting skills, but Caleb continued to cautiously monitor the situation. Suddenly, the enemy managed to reach Caleb and attacked him furiously, causing Caleb to go into severe shock. The bastard's hand reached out further, and he grabbed Gigi by the collar, preparing to finish him off with a single dagger strike. This was exactly what the protagonist needed, and he called out to Urnil in an emergency. The monster was not thrilled with this turn of events. Urnil tried to help Caleb immediately and shot a poisoned arrow at the enemy with high precision, but the enemy managed to dodge along with Caleb, still holding him by the scruff of the neck. The enemy gave him a direct blow, which made Caleb realize that Plan B needed to begin immediately. The girl watched the whole thing in shock. Caleb recoiled in pain and told himself that the real battle had just begun, and he'd have to use the last potion he was saving for last. But suddenly the bastard's hand dipped into his pocket and pulled out the same potion. The guy was shocked. This thief even at such a moment managed to steal his potion and use it. The empty vial fell to the ground, and the bastard brought his sword again for a deadly attack on the protagonist. But Caleb smiled confidently and declared that his opponent was too late, and had fallen into his trap from the start. Caleb clearly explained that this was the plan B he had prepared in advance, and asked Yernal to be ready to play her part perfectly. Caleb drank the potion he had, assuring his opponent that he wouldn't be so easy to kill thanks to it. Caleb told Yernal to immediately fire the poisoned arrow, confirming that this was the decisive moment he'd been waiting for. At this moment, Caleb surprised his opponent by using the magic shield scroll he had, which clearly stunned and confused his opponent. Caleb gripped his opponent tightly, using his magic shield, and shouted to Yerniel to fire now with all her might, and the arrow was already flying towards them, stabbing into the bastard boss's body. Gigi taunted him and asked how he felt now, having been poisoned twice. The real battle broke out with extreme violence, and Caleb's wounds worsened as the fight continued, until the tension of the situation caused Yernal to scream in terror, worrying about his condition and wondering if he was okay. At the last moment, as Caleb felt his lungs bursting from the wound, he drank another potion in a last attempt to stay alive, convinced that these potions were his last hope of survival. But the monster immediately grabbed him and tried to attack. Caleb was surprised by the direct attack and realized that the battle had reached a very critical stage. The sword was already aimed at the Gigi's stomach. But suddenly the hand stopped before it could even slash his clothes. The dagger fell to the ground. Caleb mustered all his strength, and finally managed to throw his opponent to the ground, breathing a sigh of relief and telling himself that this stubborn foe was finally dead. Yernal rushed to Caleb crying in fear and begged him not to die, while Caleb struggled to speak to her and ask her for a healing potion. Anxiously, Yernil said that they had to cross the portal together while Caleb continued to drink the healing potions one by one, but the pain did not go away. Caleb hesitated and admitted to himself that this was a very dangerous venture. He had used up all his healing potions and could still die from the poison. Yernal begged him not to leave her and die here, but Caleb realized he had no choice but to try. Suddenly, a portal opened behind them, and the GH began to slowly get up. After a period of recovery, Caleb finally stood up, breathing a sigh of relief and saying that he felt like he could breathe again. He praised Yernal for successfully shooting an arrow at the right moment, which gave her confidence and pride in her abilities. But Yernal honestly admitted that the terrain interfered with her view and that she might not have hit. Caleb was well aware of this and explained that all long-range attacks suffer greatly when made from a low position, and he confirmed that his opponent knew this. But he gave the girl the skill of a homing arc arrow, so it made Yernal feel deeply moved and cry with gratitude. After that, Caleb realized that they needed to do something else before leaving. Yernil was puzzled and asked him what he meant. Caleb explained to her that their exit portal still had 2 free slots, and Yernil surprisingly agreed. Caleb decided to take the bodies of the 2 people lying on the ground with them when they exit the maze elsewhere in the city. The adventurers sat in the tavern awaiting the news, and began to wonder anxiously who would arrive at this late hour. The dwarf asked the noblemen if they had come to check on the arrival of the scroll of resurrection, and everyone's anxiety and anticipation was evident. Clarence replied gravely that he must check the arrival of the scroll himself, for his brother's life depended on the success of this mission. Bertiniene explained that the scroll they had ordered was due to arrive today, and that they would be able to enter the labyrinth around 5 in the morning. Clarence thought uneasily that the duration of the mission would be short, and the failure of this mission would mean the impossibility of resurrecting Abyssine. He assured himself that he must ensure the success of the mission at all costs. Suddenly, Priestess Emma entered the establishment with enthusiasm, carrying the required scroll. She announced to everyone that she had brought it, but immediately announced other important news. Emma told them in amazement that the entrance portal to the first floor of the labyrinth had just opened, which stunned and shocked everyone with this sudden news. Clarence hesitantly asked if the priestess was sure of this information. Emma said that if the priestess was sure, she was sure. The dwarf ordered everyone to go there immediately to check it out. Meanwhile, the receptionist at the gate of the labyrinth was standing by and grumbled about the adventurers' extremely long delay in getting out. Because of the strange rumors of a mage using instant magic skills without clear spells, the administrator felt obligated to deal with the chaos. Suddenly, the officer heard a sound indicating that someone was about to exit the portal. She quickly jumped up and asked hopefully if anyone had come out yet. Everyone quickly gathered upon hearing the news, and Clarence hurried over to the officer to see who had come out of the portal. He calmly replied that he was here to check on Abyssine's safety, but didn't expect much. Everyone sensed that something was about to emerge from the portal, and the officer hoped that Brother Clarence's condition would not cause him undue concern. The officer cautiously approached the portal to get a clear view of who would come out, but she was surprised and cried out in amazement as she saw him come out, which startled and stunned everyone in the room who had been expecting Abison to appear. Just behind him, Clarence appeared, moving quickly and anxiously towards the portal. Suddenly, the body of Beck Attack appeared out of the portal, lying on the ground, causing Priestess Emma to scream in shock, saying that the man who had just come out was Mr. Back Attack. Meanwhile, the administrator realized with great fear that half of the people coming out of the portal were corpses. What was going on? Clarence stood in utter amazement, asking himself if it was possible that a team of only 2 people had managed to destroy Back Attack. At that moment, he remembered the widespread rumors of a strange mage who used magic at incredible speeds without spells, and made sure that he really wasn't fooled, especially after discovering the mage's exceptional abilities. Suddenly, someone started coming out of the portal, and it was Yurnil who came out, apologizing for the delay, and for appearing first, but she quickly assured them that Caleb would be out in a few moments. Priestess Emma was beyond thrilled for Yurnil's safety, and expressed her great confidence in their success from the start. Bertanin shared her joy, also reaffirming her confidence. Yurnil humbly acknowledged that Caleb had done most of the work in this mission, which surprised the administrator to learn that she was from the Magic University slave team, and she showed great interest and curiosity. The administrator began to feel a great deal of confusion, trying to figure out how a small team of only 2 slaves could defeat someone so powerful, especially since they were a group formed only a few days ago. The officer's confusion grew more and more, and she wondered with great amazement how these 2 adventurers had managed it. The portal began to exude energy again, and Caleb emerged from it, in an extremely heavy and exhausted state, badly scarred from his wounds. His appearance stunned everyone who watched him emerge. Emma was shocked and asked in amazement if this young adventurer had really caught Back Attack, and had even managed to bring Abyson's body. Meanwhile, Bertonin asked with great concern if anyone was injured, judging by the blood covering his body. Despite his injuries, Caleb replied with a cold, sarcastic calm, saying that they were making a lot of noise for no reason. He then turned to Priestess Emma and asked for the agreed-upon money, at least 8,000 gold. Suddenly, and without warning, Caleb collapsed in front of everyone. Yurnil screamed his name in horror, begging him to stay alive. The scene then shifted to Nathaniel's temple. Caleb woke up on a bed in one of the rooms of the temple, feeling extremely tired and exhausted. Caleb asked the priestess sitting next to him what had happened. She told him that he had passed out right after coming out of the portal. It was due to severe poisoning caused by overuse of healing potions without an antidote. At that moment, Caleb remembered something important and asked about the financial reward he was to receive. The priestess smiled and pointed to a table in the room, telling him not to worry as the money was there and he could check for himself if he wished. Caleb was stunned when he checked the amount and found that it was less than the agreed-upon amount, as there was only 7,850 gold in there. The priestess explained that the reason was because 150 gold pieces had been deducted as payment for his treatment at the temple, which annoyed Caleb, since he hadn't asked for any medical treatment at all. But the priestess cheerfully told him that it was Yurnil who asked for his treatment, which made Caleb slightly angry at Yurnil, considering it an inappropriate waste. The priestess asked Caleb if he wanted his official freedom from the magical university immediately. Caleb answered in the affirmative, but anxiously inquired about the status of Abyson and Back Attack's body. The priestess assured him that Abyson was currently in the recovery chamber, and that procedures to bring him back to life would be carried out very soon. As for Beck Attack's body, it had been sent to the morgue. Caleb wondered if it was possible to resurrect Beck Attack as well, but the priestess apologized and told him that it was impossible because Beck Attack was not protected by soul preservation magic. The priestess explained the details of the soul preservation magic, specifying that it binds the soul to the body for only 1 week, but Caleb explained to the priestess that in special cases like Back Attack, if they could retrieve the soul preserved by the labyrinth master, the person could be revived. To do so, one would have to go to the Sanctuary of Souls, but since no one knows about it, it's impossible, and he himself couldn't locate it for a long time. After a brief discussion, Caleb decided to go and check things out for himself first, and the priestess bid him farewell, wishing him luck and blessings. The scene then shifted to the magical university. Caleb arrived there with Yurnil. GH looked much better and told the girl that his body was fine. He excitedly pulled out a bag of money and told Yernal that they could go back to living. She felt extremely happy and relieved to hear this news. But soon Yernal was hit with shock and immense disappointment. The official informed her that her financial accounts were not enough to get her freedom despite all the money they had collected. The official announced to Caleb and Yernal that the cost of obtaining freedom was 3,000 gold pieces for each of them, and based on Yernal's contribution of 2 gold pieces to the government, she could not be exempted. Caleb was confused and unconvinced by this decision, and asked the official directly about the criteria used to evaluate the contribution and distribute the money. The official replied that it was better to show in practice than to explain. 5. And showed them the magic scales used to accurately measure the contributions of team members during the adventure. According to the testimony of Bertanin's team, it turned out that Caleb's contribution to the battle was huge, 27,848 gold, while Yernal's contribution was minuscule, only 2 gold. Caleb was confused and upset by this result. He assured himself that he had never seen this type of magic in the game before, and disapprovingly wondered why Yernal's contribution was so low. Caleb explained to the official that it was Yernal who had created the weapon used to defeat back attack, and asked why that hadn't been factored into the score. Caleb firmly added that without Yernal's special ability to prepare poisoned arrows from monster fangs, the plan wouldn't have been executed at all. Yernal felt immense gratitude as she listened to Caleb vigorously defend her, and her eyes filled with tears, touched by his words. The official recalculated after Caleb's objection, and it turned out that Yarniel's contribution had gone up slightly. The official announced that it was time for the final reckoning for the adventure. But before that, he decided to use a special lie detector spell. The official began to activate the lie detector spell, a type of magic that shows physical reactions when a person lies. The official told them that it was standard procedure to accurately assess the slave's contributions, and asked Caleb to place his bag on the table. He asked Caleb and Yernal to recount their adventure with complete honesty and sincerity, so that he could properly and definitively assess their contributions. Caleb began pulling out his testimony items, wishing to himself that this time Yernal would also be able to free herself from slavery. Caleb confidently stated that the total cost of all the materials amounted to 14,600 gold, which was equal to the average salary of the 4-man team on the first floor. However, according to the magic scales, it was determined that Yernal's contribution was only 20%, roughly 2,925 gold, while Caleb's share amounted to 19,000 gold, which still made Yernal's contribution far less than the amount needed to buy back her freedom. Caleb was greatly disappointed as he didn't expect Yernal's share to be so low despite her great efforts. The official noticed Yernal's sadness and coldly asked if she was disappointed with the result. The official clearly stated that the average profit for slaves from an adventure is usually only around 500 gold, and that survival itself is already considered an extremely exceptional feat. The official added that what Yernal had done was nothing special, but a contribution in accordance with her modest abilities. She was only following instructions. In his opinion, she was just a machine for shooting arrows, and anyone could be accomplished the same if they followed Caleb's instructions. That sums it up, and said he was ready to hear any and all grievances right now. Caleb felt anger at these harsh words and assured himself that Yernal's input was necessary and could not be replaced by anyone else. The official sternly warned Caleb not to show any mercy or emotion towards the slave girl, arguing that sending slaves to the labyrinth was originally a form of punishment for criminals, and that this should be clear to him. Finally, the official asked Caleb if he would use the money he received to buy back his freedom. Caleb calmly replied that he would indeed use his money to ransom his freedom, and immediately paid the required amount, freeing himself from slavery. The official smiled and congratulated him on officially gaining his freedom, thereby adjourning the meeting. The guards were ordered to take Yernal away and return her to the slave quarters. As the guards were taking Yernal away, the official expressed that she might be useful to the Adventurers Guild due to her skill with a bow. At this point, Yernal anxiously turned to Caleb, trying to call out to him, while Caleb thought he would have to find her later and take her away. Before Caleb left the place, the official asked him if he was considering going to a magical university. Caleb was surprised and asked for clarification. A magical university? The official told him with a smile that the university couldn't miss out on someone with his unique talent, and they were willing to support him. Caleb noticed that things had changed a lot now that he was free. He began to realize that many mages had been killed inside the labyrinth because of its high risks, and he didn't want to go through a similar experience again. Caleb seriously asked the official about the benefits he would receive if he decided to join. The official replied that his magical talent was very exceptional, and he would be grateful for the help he would receive. Suddenly, a man entered the room, interrupting the conversation, and loudly asked Jacob about that magician prodigy. Caleb turned to the newcomer in surprise. It turned out that the man was Professor Milden, who had come because of his keen interest in meeting a brilliant wizard with fast magic he had heard about. Caleb politely introduced himself. Professor Milden expressed his admiration for Caleb's character, but told him that this was not a good time to register. The professor went on to say that it probably hadn't been that long since Caleb had gotten his freedom, but he wanted to ask him an important question. What is the mage's true purpose? Caleb hesitantly replied that the mage's mission might be to develop new magic for hunting monsters in the maze, but the professor vehemently denied that, saying there was a more noble and important mission than that. Professor Milden explained with great seriousness that the true mission of mages is to exterminate trapped humans, which left Caleb shocked and silent. He said that the maze explosions caused a lot of destruction, and that mages are always chasing and looking for solutions to prevent these disasters. He also explained that the reason for these explosions was due to the presence of a large number of trapped people. That is, people who have come from other worlds, and they must be destroyed before they cause more chaos. The professor revealed that they have discovered that if the trapped people do not enter the labyrinth for more than 2 weeks, there is a massive explosion to destroy them. He firmly stated that for the sake of peace, and no matter what, these people must be eliminated. The professor then explained that he knew Caleb's past in the labyrinth from the distant city of Van Dam, noting that he had been sentenced to slavery for the murder of his companion, the fallen man. Caleb was visibly shocked by this revelation and began to ask himself, what? Was he really a fellow traveler? Professor Milden bluntly suggested that Caleb join the Papadon Hunters Club, noting that Caleb seemed very suitable to join their ranks. He then bluntly asked him if Caleb himself was a hoppadancer. Caleb was silent for a moment, while the professor insisted on finding out the reason for his sudden silence. In fact, the reason for Caleb's silence was his fear that his lies would be revealed, especially under the influence of the lie detector spell that was used earlier during the evaluation of his contribution. As Caleb continued to remain silent and hesitant, the professor said with a sly smile that it was strange that Caleb wouldn't answer such a simple question, which increased Caleb's tension. Caleb felt a tremendous amount of pressure trying to find an appropriate answer, and pondered to himself about the best answer he could give to get out of this difficult situation. The grandfather continued to press the kid. At that moment, someone suddenly entered the room. It was Clarence to greet the professor, and he noted that it was probably too early to recruit Caleb to the club. He had just come out of the maze. Professor Milden greeted Clarence and noted with a smile that a diligent farmer always reaps his harvest, and added that Clarence's presence also meant that Professor Isilor was interested in Caleb. Clarence pointed out that Caleb's skills might make him better suited for the task of exploring the labyrinth rather than slaying the fallen. Caleb stood silent after this remark, while Professor Milden became angry at Clarence's interference, feeling that he was overstepping his authority in the conversation. Clarence continued and told Gigi with a kind smile that he didn't need to make a decision now, suggesting that he think about the proposal of exploring the labyrinth. After the conversation ended, Caleb left the place. He figured that if that spell was applied to him again, he might have to fight whoever was behind it. Caleb breathed a sigh of relief as he left the room, but was quickly reminded of the danger of this annoying spell. He asked himself how there could ever be such a convenient spell that could make others tell the truth. In his mind, Caleb kept thinking that a spell capable of detecting lies could be very useful, especially for interrogating suspects. But he also wondered if this spell had any hidden limitations or drawbacks, which made him angrier and angrier the more he thought about it. In any case, Caleb calmed himself, realizing that the effects of the lie detector spell were now completely gone, and he was no longer in danger of having his secrets revealed. Clarence approached him, apologizing for the delay in introductions, and identified himself as a senior-year mage at a magical university. The boy stated that he was the older brother of Abison, whom Caleb had recently rescued, and he expressed his deep gratitude to Caleb. Caleb calmly replied that he too was now a free man thanks to him. Clarence gently apologized to Caleb for walking beside him for a long time without saying anything, explaining that he had found it inappropriate to talk while the magic was working. Caleb was surprised by Clarence's comment and assured him that most people considered the use of that kind of spell to be extremely rude. Clarence explained that this spell was not legally allowed to be used on anyone. It is only allowed during the evaluation of slave teams. GH felt tremendous anger towards Professor Milden for his extremely unfortunate timing in using it. Clarence apologized for Professor Milden's rudeness and explained that not everyone rejects the existence of the fallen. Clarence explained the situation at Magic University to Caleb, clarifying that there were 3 main factions at the university with different orientations. First, Professor Milden's faction, which is mainly focused on the destruction of trapped people. Second, Professor Isilor's faction, which supports them and oversees the labyrinth's research operations. And finally, Professor Dahlstream's faction, which believes in honoring and worshipping the fallen creatures. Clarence explained that Professor Dahlstream studies ancient texts and magical manuscripts, and his research is on the connection between trapped humans and the Master of the Labyrinth. He added that Professor Dahlstrom believes that the Labyrinth Master is able to control human souls, manipulate them, and drive them insane. Clarence continued by saying that there was only one mage capable of resisting the Labyrinth Master's madness, and Dahlstrom believed that this mage was one of the fallen humans. Caleb was deeply shocked when he heard Clarence mention that this mage was a turn-based warlock. Clarence explained that ancient legends say that this warlock can stop the world itself and manipulate reality at will, but he added that these are only legends, with only minor mentions of it in ancient texts. Clarence added that Professor Dahlstrom's faction is the smallest, consisting of only 3 members, and relies on the efforts of a limited number of mages. Caleb asked, "Could it be called a faction then?" At which point the nobleman said that they considered it so out of courtesy. After the conversation was over, Clarence told Caleb that his professor was waiting for him, and invited him in. Inside the room was a pile of books, and Professor Isilor greeted Caleb and explained to him that their club was researching and studying the strange phenomena inside the labyrinth. Isilor added that they study secret rooms, the ecosystem, and monsters, but their main focus at the moment is on possessed people, not fallen people. Isilor outlined his theory about back attack to Caleb, saying that the man is neither dead nor alive, and he suspects that his soul is still present and trapped somewhere inside the maze. Caleb thought that even if the professor had such an epiphany, he didn't know anything about the resting place of souls yet. The professor said that with the return of the body, they have a chance to find a soul. He recognized all of Gigi's unique abilities, and explicitly asked Caleb to consider joining them and helping them find Beck Attack's soul. Caleb smiled confidently to himself, realizing that he had done a similar quest in the game before. He began to contemplate accepting the offer, because the case seemed clear and simple to him. But he hesitated a bit, realizing that avoiding doing business with Professor Milden would be the best option. At the same time, he felt that dealing with Professor Dahlstream's faction that honored the fallen would be a great burden for him. Caleb thought it over carefully, and decided that the best option would be to join Isilor's club. He then asked Professor Isilor if it would be possible for him to form his own team to carry out the club's activities. Isilor was a bit surprised by the question, and said with a smile that it was the first time he heard such a request, as most students prefer to join an already existing strong team to ensure their safety. But he added that there was no objection to it in principle. Caleb thanked Professor Isilor and agreed to join the club. Afterward, Caleb was escorted to his private room in the magic school dormitory. Upon arrival, the assistant informed him that this was his new room and advised him to get a good night's rest after his previous ordeal. Caleb entered the room, shocked, very impressed by the level of comfort and luxury, admitting to himself that this place was much better than what he was used to before, better and bigger than his apartment before. Caleb curiously asked the assistant if he could accommodate future members of his team in this room. The assistant replied that it wasn't officially allowed, but since she was working overtime too, the guy could do whatever he wanted. After the assistant left, Caleb went to the private bathroom in his room to shower and relax, finally feeling relieved after all he'd been through. As he relaxed in the tub, he began to recall the tense events of the day, his terrifying battle with Back Attack, his morning escape from the labyrinth with Yurnal. Then he remembered gaining his freedom, successfully completing his mission, and joining the magical university and Professor Isilor's club, and he was amazed at how quickly all these events had unfolded. Caleb couldn't believe it had all happened in one day. He began to plan what he would do tomorrow. He decided to visit the 24-hour library to gather information, and then go to the admissions office to get Yarnell back. Despite all of this, Caleb decided to stop thinking for now and get some rest, recognizing that he still had a long way to go. The next day, Caleb felt exhausted from attending classes in the library at night, so he went to the lecture hall. He assured himself that this fatigue was better than being subjected to the lie detector spell again. Suddenly, Professor Dahlstrom came up to greet him, and with a mysterious smile introduced himself as the one in charge of teaching the freshmen a new spell called memorization. Dahlstrom explained to the students that this spell is a special ability that allows a mage to contract with Visos, the god of wisdom. The professor added that whoever signs this contract will receive a special memory book that allows them to memorize and store magic spells. He began to demonstrate the spell in practice for the students, explaining that each student would receive a memory book that they could use to memorize a certain number of spells. Caleb activated the memorization spell as commanded, which gave him his own memory book. After activating the spell, Caleb found that the number of spells he could memorize depended on his mage level. Since he was at level 5, he had 3 available slots. The professor explained to the students that they could study and memorize as many spells as there were slots in their books, but they could also combine them. He then told them that the assistant, Scarlet, would teach them how to do this herself. Scarlet looked surprised that she was suddenly assigned this task, while the professor apologized, citing back pain. The assistant, Scarlet, had thought the first day of class would be easy, but she realized that Professor Dahlstrom wasn't going to take pity on her. Feeling tired herself, she announced to everyone that they were moving to the magical training ground and asked the students to follow her. At the training ground, Scarlet began to explain to the students that the number of slots varied depending on abilities and showed the combinations. Scarlet explained that if they combined 2 first-level spells, the result would be a second-level spell. This method is called binding, a feature that allows them to register more powerful spells without using an extra slot. She told them that it was also possible to combine 3 spells together. But this method is very difficult and dangerous, and its success rate is very low, even though it is extremely powerful. The assistant accompanying the professor demonstrated in practice how 3 different spells are combined into one, and she called it the 3-attribute strike. It is capable of dealing massive damage that combines the properties of 3 different spells into one attack. The students watched in amazement at the power of this devastating spell and realized the power and impact of this type of advanced magic. The assistant was clearly impressed with the results of the magic demonstration she presented to the students, and she assured them that they could also if they worked hard. She then presented them with a list of level 1 spells to choose from, and explained that they could purchase their chosen spells from the magic bookstore. She also told them that they could consult her in the magic tower if they needed advice. Checking the students' choices, the assistant was surprised that Caleb already had 3 spells, 3 magic slots, and an odd combination choice. Caleb calmly asked her if his choice was unacceptable. The assistant was embarrassed and assured him that it was not, but that it was indeed a very unusual choice. The assistant looked at Caleb's choice sheet with great bewilderment and wondered in confusion about the logic that made him choose this strange combination. Dust Cloud, Heat Wave, and the auxiliary spell Moisturize. The assistant angrily said that the 3rd spell is an auxiliary spell and is only used to increase humidity. Why would he need it? Suddenly, Professor Dahlstrom walked in and asked the reason for all this noise and clamor. The assistant was embarrassed and handed him Caleb's choice sheet, claiming that she didn't understand the reason for his illogical choice. Professor Dahlstrom calmly told the assistant to let Caleb continue with this choice, emphasizing that research and experimentation were the most important virtues at a magical university. Caleb watched the whole show. Finally, the professor smiled, telling Caleb that he looked forward to seeing the results of his experiments and choices and wished him luck. In the evening, Caleb returned to his dorm room at the magical university. Caleb sat relaxed in his room, registered the 3 magic spells he had chosen in his memory book, and then decided to begin the binding process to combine them. Caleb managed to combine the Dust Cloud and Heat Wave spells to produce a new 2nd-level spell, Dust Blast. Caleb smiled with satisfaction, confident that the Dust Blast spell he had created was much stronger than the standard 1st-level spells. Caleb also combined Moisturize and Heat Wave again, but this time he got a 2nd-level spell, Blazing Heat. Finally, Caleb combined all 3 spells together, Dust Cloud, Heat Wave, and Moisturize, and got a second-level spell called Cumulonimbus. Finished, Caleb contemplated his memory book, which was now filled with the 3 spells he had created, and he felt great excitement at these results. Caleb then decided that he needed a quick test with the hourglass, and that he would buy a special magical staff of the lightning element. Caleb felt very relieved that he had finished registering his spells, and decided that now he must stop to complete his most important task. Meanwhile, Yarnell was being held in the Adventurers Guild. One of the guards rudely called out to Yarnell and told her to leave her cell immediately. Yarnell heard voices outside talking about her, describing her as a slave arrested on drug charges. Yarnell was being led away to be sold soon, and she thought with despair about the kind of people who would pay money to buy someone like her. Bastards. As she climbed the stairs, Yarnell wondered sadly if she would ever meet good people again, and she feared she would be dragged into the maze again with no guarantee of coming out alive this time. Yarnell stood hesitantly in front of the door, announcing that she would enter, but she felt anxious and extremely afraid of what might happen to her now. Yarnell stood seized with despair and began to talk to herself with deep sadness about how much she missed Caleb. But suddenly she heard a familiar voice at the door and found Caleb waiting for her, which left her in complete shock and utter surprise. She asked what he was doing here and what had happened at the academy in the first place. Caleb stood confidently and said that he couldn't leave the companion he was risking his life with, which touched Yarnell with his presence and sudden rescue. Caleb held out his hand to Yarnell with a smile and promised her with great confidence that he would make her a free man. Yarnell walked beside him on the street and expressed her concern because she was still in debt and not completely free. Caleb assured her that he knew that very well, and that there were 2 ways to make her completely free. He added that he would first collect the fee for the return of Abysson's body as the first step of his plan. Caleb was surprised to hear from Clarence that he had only received 100 gold pieces of the agreed-upon amount. Clarence told him that the reason was because the magical university could confiscate the money if it was paid in full before the man got his freedom. Clarence added that it was too soon for Yarnell to receive the rest of the money, but until then, she should stay in her allotted quarters. Caleb continued talking to Yarnell, telling her that there was another option to pay off her debts. She could accompany him again on his next trip to the labyrinth. By doing so, she could pay off the rest of her debts and become a completely free person. Afterward, Caleb pointed to the bow he was carrying and told Yarnell that this bow was a gift for her, a sign that he was giving her a choice, whether to continue with him or make another decision. Wondering if Yarnell would choose to leave when she was free, Yarnell hesitated for a moment, then looked at Caleb and asked if he intended to continue his adventures in the labyrinth. Caleb assured Yarnell that he would definitely continue his adventures, and the girl said he probably wouldn't be much use. But as soon as the guy asked if the girl wanted to leave the group, she grabbed her bow and said she definitely wanted to be his comrade. And the guy was afraid that she would actually leave. Caleb smiled happily at Yarnell's request and told her that they would indeed continue together. He had already found other team members. Yarnell was very surprised and eagerly demanded that he introduce her to this person immediately, while Caleb gently warned her not to raise expectations. Later that night, as they walked together, Yarnell asked if she could stay in the dorm. Caleb said of course she could, make her feel at home, and now the sound of the girl's footsteps approaching the room could be heard. Yarnell began to feel excitement and anticipation, while Caleb was also looking forward to her reaction to the new member of the team. She was excited to be living in such a posh house. The door slowly opened, and the expected man appeared behind it. As soon as she saw him, Yarnell was extremely shocked by the man's personality. Yarnell's face expressed shock when she saw Beckatak standing in front of her, and she began to scream hysterically. While Caleb quickly tried to calm her down, Caleb explained to Yarnell that he had used the spirit summoning scroll he had gotten from Professor Isilor to bring Beckatak back to life, who stood in front of them as if nothing had happened. Beckatak felt tired and weakly greeted Yarnell while Yarnell was still tense and afraid to see him again. Yarnell showed obvious hesitation when she pointed out that she might have to leave the place, but Beckatak quickly interrupted her with a refusal. Later, Caleb read in Professor Isilor's research about a major incident that had occurred 12 years ago in the labyrinth city of Sohan. The research revealed a significant loss of life due to an explosion in the maze, with the appearance of approximately 3,000 monsters, including dangerous abyssal-type monsters. The results of the study revealed that the target of this explosion was the trapped Henry, who lived in the poor areas of Sohan. There were visible signs of resistance to the monsters. Among Professor Isilor's research came a cryptic message left by Henry before his death. The message was written in a language that only soul-bearers, fallen souls, could understand, and the message specifically warned against the magical university. Caleb wondered uneasily why Henry had left a message that only soul-bearers, the fallen ones, could read, and suspected that the message might have been a warning from the magical university itself. What was most suspicious was that the place that had been heavily damaged by the Mage explosion was the magic university itself. Caleb began to wonder if the heavy casualties were due to the fact that they were fighting on the front lines. Caleb asked himself if the magic university had been attacked by monsters after Henry had been attacked in the poor neighborhoods and the next target was needed. Caleb decided that he had to be careful and dig deeper into the facts about the message and its connection to the magical university and Professor Milden in particular. At this point, Yurnil shyly entered Caleb's room and hesitantly asked him if she could sleep here tonight. Caleb noticed that her hair was a little disheveled. It was all because that crazy zombie had started eating her hair. She very nervously asked Caleb to let her cut Beck-Attack's hair for revenge. Caleb denied her request and explained that if she wanted to stay in his room, and he told her that he had another important condition. Yurnil was surprised to see a set of scrolls that Caleb pulled out in front of her. He then explained that he had bought these scrolls in the black market that morning, which caused a look of surprise on the face of Yurnil, who at first did not understand the reason for this act. Caleb presented the mysterious scroll and told Yurnil with an enigmatic smile that he had many things he wanted to check out and asked if she was willing to help him do so. Meanwhile, Professor Milden and Professor Isilor were discussing a new project that was taking up a considerable amount of their time. Milden confirmed that it was a project to track the souls of the possessed. Isilor confirmed this, and the old professor explained that there was already a man who had talked about it, and that the man was an acquaintance of Professor Isilor's, a university student named Caleb, forming his own group. Professor Milden had suspected him, having approached Isilor about Caleb's strange abilities, which perhaps could not be explained by genius alone. Then, Milden recalled, his actions in the battle with the poisonous spider of the maze, when he had stopped the explosion of the poison bag with a precise ice attack at the last moment. Milden continued to express his doubts, amazed at how two slaves of their level could kill Beck-Attack and escape from the maze, considering it illogical and abnormal. Milden argued with apparent certainty that all the evidence pointed to the possibility that Caleb might be possessed, and that it was their duty as scientists to investigate this. For his part, Professor Isilori expressed his doubts about these assumptions, that they could not make life-changing decisions based on unconfirmed suspicions alone. However, Milden clarified that he didn't want to go that far either, but he reminded Isilor that the university was currently suffering from a severe shortage of mages. Milden added in a stern tone that they had suffered enough from their previous loss of control 12 years ago, when they had allowed just one person to escape, and he confirmed that he would continue to keep a close eye on Caleb. Professor Isilor sat alone in his office, anxiously contemplating the situation, realizing that he didn't want to interfere with Milden's plans, but he desperately needed someone as strong as Caleb to explore the depths of the labyrinth. Meanwhile, Caleb has begun looking for new members for his team, surprised that the number of applicants is more than he expected. He is, after all, a former mage slave. While waiting for interviews, Yurnil and Beck-Attack were seen wandering among the crowd, with Beck-Attack looking a little confused in his first public appearance since coming back to life. While Caleb tried to hide the fact that Beck-Attack had been summoned by the spirits, Yurnil was struck by the strangeness of the situation when Beck-Attack started rubbing her hair, which clearly tensed her up. Caleb then announced to the challengers that the purpose of their next journey was to find the resting place of Beck-Attack's soul and work towards his full rebirth. Caleb explained to the challengers that whoever wants to join must be willing to fight on the front lines, and to prove it, they must show their strength by lifting the heavy barrel placed in front of them. Caleb thought to himself that a physical test was the best solution because he couldn't test everyone's skills in detail, and throwing requires at least 15% strength. Caleb then continued talking to the applicants, saying that whoever successfully passed the first test would have to prove their fighting skills immediately afterward. Caleb firmly and clearly asked who wished to test their strength first in front of everyone. The challengers hesitated and began to look at each other with obvious concern. Caleb noticed that some applicants started to walk away due to fear of the test and lack of skills. After all, they could only get them through the fountains in the maze. You had to come back from it alive at least once. Yernal worriedly told Caleb that she didn't know how to use combat skills that well either. Caleb calmly assured her that she would learn quickly. Some of the adventurers began to object to the selection. After all, he had only gone to the labyrinth once and he acted like he was above them. Suddenly, a strange man intervened decisively, telling the complainers to give way to him if they were done talking. The adventurers felt the tension as they saw the new challenger, who was a lizard man warrior from the temple of Nathaniel from the second floor. Caleb thought, what would he do on the first floor? Especially since the temple of Nathaniel refuses to deal with spirit summoners like Bek Atak. The lizard man warrior started ranting and praying to his god to purge the likes of Bek Atak from the place. Caleb said that actually they wanted to resurrect him, give him life, but he was interrupted by another warrior, Hajikata, the swordsman from the third floor. He wants to find his friend in the maze. This new adventurer thought to himself that if he could revive Bek Atak, he might be able to find his own lost friend. So he showed great interest in joining Caleb's team. Meanwhile, Caleb inwardly wondered if he would be able to control the reaction of a lizard warrior who rejected the presence of a summoned spirit. He also needed a warrior who would stay with him for the long haul after all. Suddenly, another large man burst into the place, shouting to be allowed to participate in the interview as well. The bald man was extremely agitated, begging to be given a chance to be interviewed, while one of the others looked at him, wondering if he was really trying to compete with them. Meanwhile, he insisted to himself that he had to join this group at all costs. This man loudly introduced himself as a monk. He clearly and loudly insisted that Bek Atak was his companion, his true companion. The monk began to talk about what had happened in the past, saying that everything that had happened to Bek Atak was his personal fault. Monk explained that Bek Atak was known as the strongest adventurer on the first floor, and that he had stayed with their team for 3 whole years, even though his abilities were superior to everyone else's. He decided to stay with them simply for their comfort and camaraderie. However, as Monk and the rest of the team felt that they might be hindering the development of Bek Atak, in addition to mounting pressure from other adventurers who were trying to get him on their teams, they finally decided to let him go for the sake of his future. Monk explained that Bek Atak agreed with a smile, as if he fully understood their position, even though it was a painful decision for him. 3 weeks after that, their team was ambushed by a group of robbers, who tried to trap them inside the labyrinth by sealing the gates behind them. Only one member of the team managed to escape and call the guild for help. At that moment, Bek Atak entered through a new portal of the labyrinth that had recently opened. The monk then lost all of his companions in that battle and was seriously injured, on the verge of giving up and despairing of life. But he suddenly changed and decided to open the gate and come out to fight fiercely. The monk said that at that moment, Bek Atak began to brutally slaughter all the thieves, and he himself was so frightened that he fled the scene alone. Therefore, the monk claimed that he had a good reason to join Caleb's team and participate in the journey to find Bek Atak's soul. He then added his information about the maze, stating that they could sometimes encounter a powerful roaming boss on the first level, though usually not. Caleb was surprised by this and told himself that this was the first time he had heard of a powerful roaming boss appearing on this floor. Monk continued, explaining that he hadn't stopped blaming himself since that day, and that if they hadn't let Bek Atak leave the team, everything was fine. Monk approached Bek Atak, asking him with regret and remorse if he had sold his soul in the maze, while he himself had escaped and left him alone. In a deeply emotional outburst, the monk knelt down on his knees, tearfully apologizing, and asked Bek Atak to never forgive him for what he had done. One of the adventurers enthusiastically offered to choose the monk, as he deserved a chance to right his wrong. The lizard man warrior firmly rejected the attempt to emotionally influence such an important decision and insisted that the evaluation must be fair and objective. The lizard man warrior challenged the monk, saying that if he could break the heavy wooden barrel, he would allow him to join in as well. The monk stepped toward the barrel with confidence while Caleb watched him skeptically, knowing that monks don't usually have much physical strength. But the monk surprised everyone with his immense strength when he easily smashed the barrel, announcing to everyone that he was not just an ordinary monk, but an exceptional monk of strength. The lizard was shocked. After that, Caleb announced that his team was officially formed and advised a monk named Amos to prepare for their next adventure. Amos agreed and said that he would be away from home for a while, so he also needed to discuss matters with his wife before leaving. Caleb asked Yernal to go back to the dorm with Bek Atak for now. She anxiously asked him why and what he was going to do. GH calmly replied that he was going to stop by the Magic University for a while because he needed to finish up some business before the maze. Then he walked on and thought that if the Magical University really does have a group of trapped people, it poses the greatest danger to him and… Meanwhile, Professor Isilor pondered Caleb's actions, wondering about his unconventional choice of spells and his acceptance of this difficult mission. The professor seemed convinced that Caleb was up to something. In fact, Caleb was actually planning an elaborate conspiracy to convince everyone that he was a fall guy in order to hide his real secret. Caleb decided that in order to survive in this dangerous environment, he had to make one thing clear to everyone, that he is not possessed, but simply an exceptional genius. After deep thought, Caleb decided that he needed the help of a certain person to carry out his plan. Suddenly, Professor Milden burst into the room, rushing over to Caleb and angrily asking him if it was true that he had managed to bind the magic spells together. Caleb calmly and confidently replied that he had indeed succeeded in binding the spells in the magic book, which surprised Milden, who said in amazement that most people couldn't do it. At this point, Caleb decided to provoke Professor Milden a bit, and proudly told him that he had managed to bind not only a couple spells, but even 3 spells at once, which left Milden shocked and very angry. Milden became furious and shouted, accusing Caleb of taunting him, thinking it was impossible unless one was blessed by the god of wisdom. Professor Dahlstrom tried to calm the situation and suggested that Caleb might indeed be blessed. But Milden refused to listen and said that this was no time for jokes. Milden angrily stated that even binding 2 spells was extremely difficult, and for him to bind 3 was impossible unless Caleb was possessed. The other professor tried to stop the old man. After all, he decided he would use the lie detector spell again to prove it. Milden directly threatened Caleb, saying that if it turned out he wasn't possessed, he would apologize and compensate him. But if he was possessed, he would kill him on the spot. Caleb replied coldly, telling Milden to start the test immediately, pointing out that Milden had already determined the outcome beforehand. Milden activated the lie detector spell and demanded that Caleb confess. Caleb answered shockingly and bluntly. "I am a possessed person from another world," he said in front of everyone, which stunned everyone present. At that moment, Caleb activated his hourglass ability that stops time. Caleb felt relieved that he was finally able to use his ability, and thought that he needed to convince everyone at least once. Caleb began to observe everyone's reactions, trying to spot any potential collusion amongst those present at the Magical University, focusing on Milden and Isilor in particular. He noticed that Professor Dahlstrom seemed completely uninterested in the matter, while there was a new mysterious man who was watching him closely, which made him suspicious. Caleb smiled sarcastically and decided to start with a lie to deliberately confuse Milden. He announced in a loud, sarcastic voice that his previous adventure in the maze had been marvelous and indescribably exciting. Suddenly, Caleb felt the intense pain of telling a lie under the spell, resulting in a strong magical backlash against him. Professor Isilor immediately intervened, stating that this reaction was false and that Caleb was not possessed at all. Milden was extremely confused by this result and had a hard time realizing that Caleb was indeed not possessed as he had originally thought. Caleb mentally apologized to Milden, explaining that it wasn't personal, but it was very hurtful. A week later, Yernal met with Caleb and anxiously asked him if his wounds were fully healed. Caleb replied with a smile that he was fine now, admitting to himself that he had remained unconscious for 2 days after activating his ability. Caleb remembered that Milden had apologized profusely to him and had sincerely given him valuable compensation for what had happened between them. The gift that Caleb received from Milden was the legendary Greed Compass, capable of pinpointing the exact location of treasures inside the maze. After that, Caleb made sure the team was ready for their next adventure, calling each member of the team, Yernal, Amos, and Beckatak to confirm their readiness. After everyone confirmed they were ready, the team excitedly headed to the Labyrinth Gate to begin their new adventure. At the Labyrinth Gate, Caleb noticed that the other adventurers were secretly talking about something, and anxiously asked Yernal if she could hear what they were saying. Suddenly, a strange adventurer approached Caleb's team, gently calling out to them and asking if they had a moment to talk before they entered the portal. Caleb began to question this new adventurer's motives. They probably wanted their gear, and thought to himself that the situation had gotten complicated, and he had to be extra careful from now on. When Caleb asked the strange adventurer why he was interested in them, Ta replied with a smiling, deceptive face that she was simply concerned for the safety of the new adventurers. She then continued with a sly look, pointing out that the labyrinth was full of thieves, and slyly suggested that she would hold their valuables for them until they returned. But Friar Amos objected strongly and with apparent anger, telling him that their team leader, Caleb, was very clever and could easily handle any aspiring thieves who tried to rob them. She quickly backtracked, embarrassed, and tried to justify her position, claiming that she only wanted to give them advice and warn them of the dangers. Caleb was bored with this conversation, and he decided that the team should enter the labyrinth immediately, telling the adventurer to do as he pleased. After they moved on, Yernal felt uneasy and whispered to Caleb that these men might be the very thieves they had been warned about. But Caleb smiled confidently and reassured her, explaining that even if they followed them, Yernil would be able to easily detect their presence beforehand. Soon, however, the team heard the voice of the previous adventurer, screaming for help from inside the labyrinth, urgently asking for assistance. Caleb stood with his team, wary and cautious, and responded loudly, asking how they could trust him when he was suddenly asking for help. To himself, Caleb thought coldly that if this was a game, he would have killed him without the slightest thought. He then asked him in a clear voice if he was now trying to steal their things. She replied with confusion, admitting the rudeness of his previous actions, but said he didn't know they were being attacked by unknown assailants inside the labyrinth. The elf immediately assumed that the girl in front of them was telling the truth. But the GG knew that trusting strangers in the labyrinth was tantamount to suicide, so he pointed his wand at the woman and told her to get out in 3 seconds, even though she begged him not to send her to her doom. He ignored it and started counting while the girl begged to be spared. His gaze didn't change and he counted on. And now she realized, this isn't a joke, and she agreed to go back. Only one condition, don't shoot her in the back. Suddenly, Yarnell saw something and told Caleb that someone was running fast towards them from the front. The adventurer started screaming in terror, trying to warn them of the impending danger, indicating that someone or something was chasing him. Caleb quickly asked Yarnell how many people were approaching, and she fearfully replied that there were 4. At that moment, they were suddenly attacked from the front by an arrow, and the monk quickly repulsed it, which caused extreme tension in the ranks of the team. Was the ambush really true? However, the adventuress suddenly fell silent, then turned to Caleb, and with a malicious smile on his face and asked his opinion of her performance. Monk Amos understood the situation and shouted to Caleb, warning him of the spell, cast by a lying adventurer called the Jester's Spellbreaker. Caleb quickly reassured Amos that he was fine and simply told him to keep his eyes forward and beware of the impending danger. At the critical moment, Caleb activated his special ability, Hourglass, to freeze time, and stop the attack that almost hit him, and he began to quickly think of how to handle the situation. Caleb began to calmly analyze the situation, realizing that the attacking mage had played a decoy role in their ranks. Gigi realized that the attackers wanted to target him and Yernal directly, instead of confronting the strong monk Amos. The guy explained to himself that his opponents used the Spellbreaker skill to turn his attack into a weak random spell instead of a powerful one. He added that their plan involved paralyzing Yernal first because she was weak in direct combat, and then confronting Amos alone. Caleb thought to himself that he had made a mistake in letting them act first, but this time he decided to act decisively, and immediately used the electric shock spell on his opponents without hesitation. But Caleb realized that there was a possibility of a serious mistake. If he didn't kill the attacking mage immediately, it could result in the death of Yernal, who had told him a few tidings from the scrolls. The ability's countdown began to diminish rapidly, but Caleb was sure he had enough time to act thanks to the hourglass. Caleb took out a special magic scroll he had prepared in advance, and decided to use it immediately to limit the effect of the skills the enemy used. Caleb only had 3 seconds left, so he shouted sharply, stating that the opponent would die in a moment, and used an electric shock spell. Time came back to normal. The spell struck his opponents directly, causing them to immediately fall and completely defeat the decoy bitch. Caleb stood triumphantly over his defeated opponents while she asked him in shock and trepidation what had happened and how he had managed it. Caleb coldly stated that his method of fighting them was the right one, adding that death was the only answer for the bastards. She tried to ask Caleb to wait, but Mr. ignored him completely and immediately used a dust blast spell to finish them off quickly and permanently. One of the gang members was surprised at what had happened and began shouting in confusion, wondering why the spellbreaker he was relying on hadn't worked. At that moment, Caleb activated his special ability, the hourglass, to stop time and assess the situation more clearly as he considered the enemy's tactics. Caleb then noticed a dwarf among the group who seemed to be manipulating the body of a puppet that was moving with them. Caleb realized why Yurnal had heard 4 pairs of footsteps earlier. Caleb immediately began to execute a counterplan, using an electric shock spell, while simultaneously asking Yurnal to shoot her arrow directly at the dwarf. Caleb and Yurnal's attacks resulted in a massive explosion that knocked down several gang members and seriously injured the rest. Then lightning struck the puppet, and the elven woman hit the gnome with an arrow. At the same time, the remaining gang members began to panic, desperately trying to figure out what was going on around them in this chaos. Monk Amos walked over to one of the surviving gang members, then looked at another, who begged him to let him live. But Caleb coldly reminded him of his earlier words, and pointed his wand directly at his head. Caleb continued in a determined tone, reiterating his stance, saying he would not hesitate any longer, and he once again applied the electric shock. After the fight was over, they built a fire. The team looked extremely exhausted, especially Yurnal, who was so scared that she couldn't use her listening skills effectively this time. But the monk urged her to be strong, assuring her that she should become a trustworthy companion and be proud of herself. A little while later, Caleb woke up apologizing for falling asleep, thinking that the magic scroll he used earlier had some side effects. Caleb noticed that Amos had started looking at the gear. Amos had started to look at the gear they had taken from the gang that had attacked them, and suggested that he choose what he wanted to keep. Caleb decided to take only the gear and supplies they really needed, reasoning that anything expensive would be too heavy to carry. Among the loot Caleb decided to keep were 5 medium-quality healing potions, a time-reduction elixir, and a valuable scroll for resurrecting corpses, considering these items very important for their next adventure. Caleb used telekinesis to organize the items and carry them easily, which made it easier for them to prepare to leave. Caleb asked the team to hurry up and finish their preparations to leave the area, but Yurnal suddenly stopped Caleb and told him she heard a strange sound coming from his bag. Caleb was a bit surprised and reached into his belt, and then pulled out the legendary compass of greed that Professor Milden had given him earlier. The team remembered that the compass was capable of detecting treasure chests in the maze, and Yurnal wondered if they could rely on it now. Caleb confirmed it, but clarified that fully resurrecting back attack was his priority at the moment. Caleb asked Yurnal not to do that, not to overreact to every sound he heard, which made Yurnal feel a little embarrassed and say that she was only skilled at hearing. With a gentle smile, Caleb told her that she was already very good at it, and that she shouldn't worry about reporting every little sound she hears. When she told him that she was hearing the sound of water, Caleb suddenly took notice of it, and insisted on quickly finding out the location of the sound. Yurnal led them to the source of the sound, which turned out to be the source of blessings, a rare source that randomly appears in the labyrinth. According to the legends, as Caleb mentioned, this spring grants special powers to adventurers who drink from it. Caleb warmly thanked Yurnal for discovering this spring, which made her feel very proud and happy. He asked the two of them, would they like to receive the blessing right now, but warned the team that obtaining a skill from the blessing source was not an easy matter. The monk tried it, but it didn't work. Certain conditions had to be met first, such as personal characteristics and weapon level. Caleb asked Amos if he had ever tried using the source of blessings with his current weapon, and Amos said he had not. The GH then encouraged Amos to try the source, assuring him that it would be worth it. After all, this monk had level 15 strength and a great level of club wielding. Amos went to the spring and dipped his bald head into it, suddenly felt something. He was immediately surprised to receive a powerful new skill called Gaia Destroyer, which made him scream with joy and amazement at his power. Caleb asked Yurnal to try it too, because she was at the same level as Amos and should have easily gotten a similar skill. Indeed, Yurnal had gotten an amazing skill called Triple Shot, and was very happy with the result of the experiment. She then advised Caleb to try it as well. Caleb hesitated for a moment, knowing that mages were usually excluded from the blessings of the source. But the girl began to persuade him, and a strong curiosity drove him to try it. As Caleb dipped his face into the water of the source, a strange and clear information screen appeared in front of him, causing him to wonder and question what was going on. Information appeared in front of Caleb, confirming that his wisdom level had exceeded 10, and so he was able to select an introductory skill. The first skill that appeared in front of him was Directional Modifier, a skill that allows him to move his arm or staff without spending action points. The second skill was Time Merchant, which allows for 1 second from Hourglass to shorten a skill's recovery time or remove a minute of debuff. The third skill was Memory Book Editor, which allows you to swap spell slots in his magic book during his turn. The fourth skill was Mind Controller, an active skill that allows him to control a lower-level team member. Caleb was surprised by the power of the 4 skills presented, which even gave him a headache already. After a short thought, Caleb decided to choose the skill Directional Modifier, believing it to be the most useful to him under the current circumstances. After he made his choice, the team asked if he was okay, as they thought he had almost drowned, but he assured them that he was fine. Caleb began testing his new Hourglass skill. The GH noticed that using the skill didn't cost him action points, which he was very pleased about. The team decided to leave and continue on their journey towards their main goal, reviving Back Attack, which was now made easier with these new skills. While they were walking, Yurnal noticed something strange Amos was carrying and asked him what it was. He replied with a warm smile that it was a talisman from his wife. Yurnal was surprised and curiously asked him how they met, especially since he was a monk and married. Amos replied that they first met in the Adventurers Guild, and that his wife was the one who formed the team with Back Attack. Amos also explained that his wife knew of the large debt he owed Back Attack, and so she had allowed him to join the mission without a paycheck. Yurnal was impressed by the kindness of Amos's wife and called him a truly wonderful man. But Caleb was worried about the monk's mention of wanting to return alive, because such statements usually portended bad fortune in adventures. Suddenly, the guy in front of them stopped. The red-haired zombie blunted and stared forward. Suddenly, Back Attack began to run hysterically forward, screaming, which puzzled the team, and made Yurnal wonder what was chasing him. Caleb quickly realized the reason for Back Attack's sudden behavior, and explained to the team that he had found the location of his soul and was instinctively heading towards it. Caleb confirmed that Back Attack's soul was in a location between floors, on a floor known as Floor 1.5. Yurnal was very surprised by this and asked him about this strange floor with great bewilderment. Amos confirmed Caleb's words and mentioned that he had heard old rumors about the existence of such a place in the maze. Caleb confirmed that it was the place where Back Attack's soul was being held. Before Caleb could finish his sentence, Yurnal became confused and worriedly told him that she may have stepped on something again, causing the area around them to start collapsing. Amos tried to warn the crew to flee immediately, but Caleb calmed everyone down and told them to stay calm, indicating that he expected something like this to happen, and thanked Yurnal for finding a new entrance. The mysterious entrance to Floor 1.5 appeared, and there was a portal inside. Caleb decided that this was their new destination, and told the team that they should head there now. When they arrived at this strange floor, they were surprised to find that it resembled a very old village. Yurnal commented in amazement that it looked like it was a village from an old game, which made the team very curious to find out what awaited them in this mysterious place. The place is completely silent. Upon entering the mysterious floor, they need to keep their voices down, because the team encountered creatures called Border Guardians, who are level 1.5 creatures and usually move in large groups, making them very dangerous to confront. Caleb assured his team that if they stayed calm and avoided attracting attention, they could get past these creatures without any problems. Caleb reiterated that direct combat would not be in their favor, so they should quickly and quietly find the Back Attack's soul vessel and leave quickly. GH had already played in the area, so it was unlikely they would get lost. They walked further down the streets. Caleb pointed to a distant spot and said it was the likely location of Back Attack's soul vessel, and the team began to approach the soul shrine with extreme caution. Opening the door, he realized that so far everything was exactly as he remembered. And so far it didn't look dangerous. The team reached a room filled with vessels that usually contain the souls of adventurers, but they found that all of these vessels were completely empty. The monk anxiously asked how they would be able to find Back Attack's vessel among all of them, but Caleb argued that the vessel they were looking for would surely be in a prominent place. Caleb spotted a vessel glowing with a strong green light on a high place and pointed it out, saying that it was definitely the vessel containing Back Attack's soul. Caleb confirmed that as soon as they took the vessel, the monsters would run after them. So he suggested that they quickly take the vessel to the first floor to revive Back Attack. But Yurnal suddenly warned Caleb that there was another glowing vessel nearby, which surprised and worried Caleb. Even the monk wondered why another vessel containing another adventurer's soul had appeared in this mysterious place. He wondered if it meant that the labyrinth master had just taken another soul. Caleb began to quickly think how it is. He is the best on the first floor, believing that the appearance of a new vessel means that something unexpected is happening in this area of the labyrinth. The Elphus immediately warned him that someone was heading towards them, and GH realized that means someone died just now on floor 1.5. Meanwhile, a wounded adventurer suddenly appeared, running towards them and shouting to warn his companion of the danger coming their way. The wounded adventurer tried to convince his companion to leave him and run to save his life, but his companion insisted on staying with him. They burst into the cathedral, where the protagonist's squad was already standing at the ready. The boy was in shock when a lizard-man warrior suddenly appeared, and was immediately disappointed to see this fool they'd met before. The lizard man started yelling angrily at Caleb, asking how he could have left the door open. Caleb said that they were now in danger because of him. Bernard explained that the monsters had started attacking, and they should immediately prepare for battle, which infuriated and annoyed Caleb, who told him that they were the ones causing all these problems. GH asked what he was even doing here, and Bernard replied that he came at the behest of the church, and that their meeting here might be the divine will of the goddess Nathaniel, which made Caleb even angrier at his actions. Bernard spoke to the goddess, convinced that their meeting in this place was not an accident, but part of a divine plan. They were interrupted by another adventurer, shouting that this was no time to talk, and that the monsters were already breaking through the barrier and attacking. Bernard began to use a powerful defense skill called PAUMA's barrier to fend off the monster's initial attack and seal the door with the barrier. While Bernard was fighting, he asked Caleb to quickly support his team, which pissed off Caleb, who didn't want the situation to escalate to this point. Caleb was beginning to feel frustration and anger because he had been anxious to finish this mission quietly, but he realized that now he would have to intervene. Caleb asked Bernard to follow his instructions for a while, but Bernard abruptly refused and asked why. Caleb explained with great anger that Bernard and his group were the ones who had brought the monsters and caused this great chaos. And now the lizard realized his guilt and awaited orders from the protagonist. Caleb felt the tension and began to realize that his plan had completely changed. They couldn't escape. They would have to resurrect Bek Otek right here. After all, there was no way for them to get out of here alive in this state. Caleb decided to use the powerful scroll he had and cast a special spell called Eternal Rest to protect the vessel containing Bek Otek's soul. Caleb asked Yernal to quickly prepare to catch the vessel while he would guide it to her with his magic ability. Meanwhile, the arguments and tension between the two teams continued, especially with the other adventurers displeased with Bernard's actions. The boy gave them orders, but the dwarf said he wouldn't listen to him. After all, he listens only to his general lizard. This angered the protagonist. Caleb directly challenged Bernard, pointing out that his strategy of a direct frontal assault had failed, and it resulted in the loss of one of his team members, causing him to rethink his future options. Bernard's team was confused and anxiously confirmed that one of their team members had died just moments ago. Caleb quickly reassured them and told them that if they followed his instructions, he promised to revive their companion and successfully complete the mission, which surprised and interested the team. But first, he asked them to look behind their backs to confirm his words, and told them that souls are automatically stored in the vessels if someone dies between floors of the labyrinth. Yernal confirmed this and pointed to another glowing vessel that had appeared a few moments ago. The team was shocked when they realized that the new vessel belonged to their dead companion, Austin, and Caleb assured them that he would immediately revive him in the area. Caleb added that the payment issue would be fairly settled later at the temple, which made the team feel relieved and hopeful that their companion would be saved. The team decided to immediately follow Caleb's instructions. Now, fully convinced of his sincerity, they explained their combat abilities and special skills to him so that he could coordinate a plan with them. They urgently asked Caleb to help them rescue their companion. Caleb smiled and said that he understood their request very well. Suddenly, the monsters started to break through the barrier and the door, and everyone realized that the battle had begun and they needed to act fast. The team went on alert, and Caleb announced with great pride and confidence that it was time to begin this decisive battle. Some time ago, the bishop entrusts Bernard with an important mission from the religious order. Bernard dutifully agrees and awaits instructions from his superior. The bishop orders Bernard to enter the labyrinth immediately and verify the rumors about the preservation of souls. The bishop guarantees the full support of the order and demands unconditional success from his subordinate. Bernard vows to remember the bishop's words and fulfill his commission. Now he speaks the name Nathaniel in battle with a feeling, perhaps a prayer. The lizard questions the reason for such an ordeal sent from above. Caleb states that the enemy is clearly outnumbered in a head-on collision. Delay is deadly, for it is already approaching. He urgently commands that the closets be stacked and entrusts the elf and the dwarf with the care of the vessels. The strongmen confirm that the order to move the items has been carried out, reporting back to Caleb. Caleb warns everyone to stand back, intending to blast through the ceiling with a massive explosion. He casts a blast of dust and punches through the building. Now he commands all members of the group to immediately climb to the resulting roof. And they quickly begin to carry it out, climbing up through the closets. Imus and Bernard are ordered to also climb up with the others. But suddenly something surprises the protagonist greatly. The monsters have already broken through the doors, and only a religious fanatic and a monk are left downstairs. The bastards in cloaks are rushing towards them faster and faster. Caleb is ordered to go up first while they try to hold off the enemies. The lizard activates a defensive skill called Guardian Shield for defense, and now the now bald men prepare to fight together, starting to quickly chop down the enemies that keep coming and coming at them. The defenders recognize that they can't hold out much longer, and Caleb gives the order to retreat back, just like the rest of the squad upstairs. The guy explains the reason for the retreat. The horrible creature is already closing in on them. Immediately, a huge, ugly hand grasped the wall of the building. The lizard exclaims in horror, not understanding the nature of the monster that has appeared before them, and some sort of terrifying ghost appears with a staff in its hands. The monster is identified as the guardian of the sanctuary, the main threat of the place. A squad member anxiously reports that the monsters have begun to regain their strength. The guy confirms the possibility of victory, but points out the problem. The boss is healing all the guards. Bernard explains that this is undead healing magic, and urgently asks Barbarian to go downstairs to help. Barbarian accepts this task, realizing that his goal is not victory, but only to gain precious time. Now only the corpse, the dwarf, the elf girl, and the main character were already on the surface. The girl says she's going into surgery right now. Caleb warns to be careful before starting an important stage of the operation. The dwarf expresses hope for the successful execution of the plan by the girl, who promises to do her best, and Gigi emphasizes that he has a lot of faith in her, because all hope is now in Yurnal. The guy explains to Yurnal the reason for this responsibility. The success of the whole operation depends on her actions and decisions at this critical moment. It becomes known that the guardian of the sanctuary has the magic of healing, amplification, and auras for the undead. Additional danger comes from the boss's stench, which lowers resistance and causes mental confusion. The GH insists on the absolute necessity of maintaining mental clarity at all costs. Bernard admits that the warning was given, but putting it into practice has proven extremely difficult. The barbarian exclaims in despair about the endless stream of enemies that have to be destroyed, but suddenly something surprises him greatly. The staff of the chief guardian lights up again, and the barbarian states that at this rate of monster recovery, the battle can become endless. After all, the enemies fall dead and in a second get up, ready to fight again. One of them approached and was almost ready to strike the lizard with a blurred consciousness. The barbarian sharply calls out to Bernard, demanding that he come to his senses and focus, and protects him by fending off the attack just seconds before the inevitable. The barbarian reminds him that it's a long way from the end of the fight, and encourages everyone to stay focused. Bernard apologizes, attributing his condition to exposure to the stench, and admits his indiscretion. Caleb turns to Bernard, perhaps asking if he now realizes how wrong their frontal tactics were. And now the lizard is perplexed to note the unusual condition of one of the fighters, how he deftly kills one by one, giving no mercy or passage to any monster. He was surprised at the monk's resilience, unaffected by the stench. The lizard immediately asked a direct question to the monk about the secret of his resistance to the monster's suffocating odor. The monk briefly replies that his training on Mount Daly was geared towards just that. He was trained in the art of stillness within the mind, which impressed the lizard. Caleb sharply draws Amos's attention, pointing out the actions of the sanctuary keeper. Just then, the pile of monsters regenerates again, and a battle cry is heard from the monk, before delivering a powerful blow to the ground enemy, crushing Gaia. Everyone is amazed at the monk's unexpected skill, not believing it's the same seeker from the first floor. Just then, the dwarf notices a strange glow in the sky, and it only took him a little closer look at it. He realized everything, and urgently reported to Caleb about the appearance of a flare in the sky above the battle. The GG immediately gave a clear command to all the participants of the battle to immediately start withdrawing from their positions. Caleb was relieved to recognize Yernal's successful completion of the task at a critical moment, who stood there telling some bald man to come to his senses and get up quickly to continue the action. The order from above is to fall back. The team upstairs needs to buy time, despite the small area of the explosion that will have to be done manually. Bernard recognizes the impossibility of holding all the guards, sees the ability timer, and declares the only way out. Caleb applies a series of 4 dust explosions in a row to achieve the desired effect, all of which are directed into the ceiling, directly below which is a horde of guardian monsters and a group of heroes. The plan is to rain debris down on the guards and the Sanctum Guardian himself. The dwarf was shocked by this plan, and the ceiling above the head guardian had already begun to crack, and the debris immediately began to fall on the cloaked bastards, crushing small and large alike with force. Now there is only dust in their place, which surprised some of the squad members. Caleb shouts that this is the right moment for action, and hurries his companions upstairs. The barbarian agrees to go up, but insists that the other lizards go first for the sake of speed. Just then, however, a single guard suddenly flies out of the dust cloud, but a huge metal mace stops him right in the face. It is the lizard who rushes to block the path of the enemies, giving his comrades a chance to climb higher. But the monk sullenly lowers his head and realizes that no, he won't do that. He remembers Beck's smile when all was well, and his terrible grimace when he had come to save them. The monk clenched his teeth tightly and realized he would never do it again. He firmly declares his decision to stand to the death, not to flee, abandoning his companions, and rushes forward, destroying several guards with a single blow. The lizard was in complete shock because now Amos stood there and said he had everyone's backs. They should get out of here. The companion accepts his decision, understanding his motives and expressing respect for his choice. And soon there is heartfelt praise from the lizard, recognizing the monk as an outstanding frontline fighter, and he rushes upward as the monk is attacked by guards. The guy was ready for it and prepares to strike again, just as suddenly all the enemies in front of him are killed by a lightning attack. It was Caleb, who from above urgently called for Imus, promising cover fire during his ascent. But suddenly a huge staff appeared out of the rubble. GH was shocked at this turn of events. Alert message. The Sanctuary Guardian recovered from the blow and rose again. A warning to Imus. The guards are preparing for another attack. He should run away immediately. The scene shifted again to the elf who was running at full speed, and her new companion asks to slow down a bit, struggling to keep up with the girl who has no more time. He desperately shouts that he has just been resurrected, and there is simply no time to swing. And that's easily fixable, as the girl immediately pours a bunch of healing potions on him, and now she says he's healthy enough to run. The man doubts whether he's fully recovered, but the girl fears for the whole group if he delayed. And now the adventurer demands immediate directions, realizing the criticality of every second. The group in the meantime was firing back at the enemies, and while the monk was climbing up into the hole from it, the GG was shooting lightning at the monsters. The lizard says that time is running out and tells the monk to give his weapon, and the reptile quickly grabs it in order to pull the bald man to the surface. GG again uses the electric lightning strike spell against the pursuing enemies. The dwarf continues to fire his crossbow. The lizard was still trying desperately to pull the monk out as well, giving his other arm and trying to pull as hard as he could. But immediately the fat man noticed something strange. He anxiously notes a strange cold sensation in the area of his ankle, which the head guard was already holding on to and smiling bloodthirstily and giggling. Sensing the nearness of disaster, the dwarf intensifies his crossbow attack and orders the others to flee. And now the arrows were flying straight into the guards' faces. But they were no hindrance to him at all, just toothpicks. There is a cry of rage from the lizard, accusing the monster, and a call to hold on to the last. But the monk's strength is leaving his hands, impossible to hold on much longer. The lizard vows to save his comrade and demands that he never let go of his hand. Amos' voice sounds doomed. It's too late. The others are ordered to flee without him. An urgent command to use magical throwing knives for one last attack. And one of them flies past the monk, smashing straight into the guard's head with force. And finally Amos can go up and the bastard guard goes down, and crumble to the ground with a crash and a thud. Now that everyone's up there, someone is thanking Amos for his efforts in this difficult battle. and now wants to greet each other properly. Bek Otek immediately appeared in front of the monk and greeted his old friend cheerfully.